My husband and I had an affair with the same man. I'm 27 years old and my husband is 34. Before we got married, I knew that he was bisexual, so this was not a problem to me. Last year, we both decided to get in shape and signed up for the same gym. Okay, I see where this is going. The way this palette has a chokehold on me. And of course, my husband insisted on getting me a personal trainer. My husband is no longer attracted to me, so he needs me to get in shape. Over the years, I've gained about 20 pounds and my husband's always telling me how I used to look was so much better. Is he Brad Pitt? The personal trainer I was assigned at the gym was really good looking. I was super happy about this because I knew my husband was going to get jealous, but not the kind of jealousy I was expecting. I kept noticing that my husband would stare at the trainer every single time he came around. And then of course my husband requested he train him too. Every single day we'd go to the gym together, he would train for half an hour and then I would train for half an hour. This is when I started noticing some funny things. Just to piss my husband off, I would periodically go check on him while he was working out. Good for you, sis. Be petty. Be petty. My husband would just look me up and down and ask, what are you doing? And then I'd say, just come in and check on you. Without fail, every time I showed up to just check on them, they would stop their conversation. It's like they were trying to hide what they were saying. What I did next was absolutely next level bitch. I completely changed the way I started dressing to the gym. I started wearing thongs and short shorts. And it worked. I got the attention of my trainer and we started flirting. From there, it was easy. All I had to do was pretend I liked him. Eventually, I actually did start liking him, and that's when I decided to propose the affair. Problematic queen over here. My husband was so busy getting in shape and flirting with the trainer that he didn't even notice our affair. A couple of months later, I was in the best shape of my life. My husband was also in pretty good shape, but we were not getting along at all. We were constantly fighting, and every time we went to the gym, it was a huge argument. He was always upset because I was always flirting with the trainer. And if you're wondering, my husband and I did have an open relationship in the past. During this time, my husband was hooking up with men and women as well. When I told my husband about the affair, he just laughed. I was so shocked at his behavior, I asked him what was so funny. He looks at me and says, I've been a trainer as well. And here's something I forgot to mention. I was giving him money. I was basically this man's sugar mama. So I'm only 3 years older than the trainer. That's when my husband says, how much money have you been giving him? We were both giving him about $1,000 a month. Damn, this trainer got lucky with you guys. Couldn't even get mad at each other because we thought it was so funny that we had been both having an affair with the same man and both giving him money. This actually brought us back together and we decided to make peace. My husband said that he would end the affair with the trainer and I told him that I would too. But that was a lie. I'm pretty sure my husband's having another affair with another man from the gym. This man also goes to the gym and I see them talking all the time. I got jealous for a few days, but then I got over it. Queen. I felt a little sus about the trainer, so I told him that I wasn't able to give him money anymore. Guess what he did? He told me that he couldn't see me anymore. His girlfriend had found out about the relationship. So I got really angry and I told him that my husband and I knew that he was having an affair with both of us and that we were both giving him money. And I also told him that if he didn't want me to ask for the money, then he should quit the job so that I can feel at peace at the gym. So he quit. I'm definitely looking to start another affair. I know what you guys are thinking. We should probably just get divorced. But no, we're happy, we have money, and we can have affairs. I don't really need your advice. I just wanted to tell you. Oh my gosh.
Story time about how my aunt drugged me. So a little background information. I was 16 and in 10th grade. And I had never met my aunt before, but whenever my parents talked about her, it was only bad things. Well, the one day I went to go and ask my mom something and I heard her on the phone with someone. She was like, no, I'm not giving you any more money. It's not my fault if you spent it all on drugs. And we barely talked about my aunt, so I didn't know that's who she was talking to. Fast forward, I come home from school the one day and my dad's sitting on the porch with this woman who looks like she's homeless. My dad introduces her. He's like, oh, by the way, this is your aunt. He was like, oh, well, she wants to spend some time with you, so you're going to go with her for a few hours. I was hesitant because of all of the stuff that my mom had told me about her, but I started walking down to her car and my mom whips in the driveway. Eventually, my aunt ends up talking my mom into letting me see her, and apparently my aunt has been asking to see me for a very long time. So she takes me to the mall, we eat, we get our nails done, and at this point, I'm thinking she's kind of normal until she takes me to her house. Like for part 2. Part 2 about my aunt who drugged me. So like I said, she ended up talking my mom into letting me go with her, which I was super grossed out because she smelled really bad and her car was a mess, but she took me to the mall. I thought she was normal. And then she took me to her house. When we got into the neighborhood, I kind of recognized it because my grandma lived in the same neighborhood. But anyways, we pull up and it is literally trashed. Like, there's fucking garbage all outside of the house. And I walked inside thinking that it would be better. No, it was filthy. There were needles everywhere. You could definitely tell that druggies lived there. And they had weird pictures hanging up all over the walls of these girls, random girls. Like when I asked who they were like, oh, I don't know. So then her boyfriend's walking around the house. He's like 40 years old, walking around in his boxers around me. So I call my mom, I go outside and I'm waiting for her. And my aunt comes out and she's like, do you want a glass of water? She gave me some water and it tasted really sour and I had chugged the whole thing. And that was the last thing I remember before I woke up on her couch in the morning. Like for part 3. Part 3 about my aunt who drugged me. So like I said, I was sitting outside on the stairs waiting for my mom and she comes over to me and asks me if I want a drink and I'm like, sure. So I chugged the water and it tasted sour, woke up in the morning on her couch. And when I woke up, my aunt was in the middle of doing drugs and some random lady who I don't even know how she got there, she asked me if I wanted a cigarette or if I wanted any of the drugs. So I got up, I was like, no, I don't do drugs. And I ran out of the house and I was like super dizzy when I got up. So I ate shit on the way out of the house. I ran outside. I ran into this lady. I asked her to use her phone. I told her a little bit of what happened. After I ran towards my grandma's house and my mom came and picked me up and I got grounded for 3 months because my aunt drugged me and my mom let me go with my aunt.
Story time about how my boyfriend's best friend kissed me. Should I tell him? His best friend is a girl. Disclaimer, is not my story time. It's not on Instagram. My boyfriend and I have only been dating for 2 weeks. 2 weeks. We actually met a couple of months ago on a dating app. We went on several dates over the course of 4 months, and after that he asked me to be his girlfriend. I said yes. While we were dating, I met a couple of his friends, one of them being his girl best friend, and she is bi, which I did know of. Okay, but here's the messed up thing. The day I met this girl, she was staring at me. Not just like staring at me a little bit, hardcore staring. She even told my boyfriend that I was so attractive that he needed to take care of me because she could snatch me up. And she said this in front of me. My boyfriend thought it was hilarious and just laughed at her. And to be honest with you, even though yes, she's a girl, she made me feel extremely uncomfortable. She would always compliment my body in front of everybody. She would comment on how my boobs are so big. We all went to the beach one time and she said, I quote, if your bikini top pops off, I don't mind, girl. I did not laugh. She even went up behind me and tried to untie my bikini. My boyfriend thought it was so funny. Part 2 is story time about how my boyfriend's best friend kissed me. Should I tell him? And she's a girl. Disclaimer, is not my story time. It's on me on Instagram. When she tried to untie my bikini top, I got really upset. I yelled at her, but my boyfriend thought it was funny. When my boyfriend and I got back to his apartment, I told him that his best friend made me really uncomfortable. And he said, you're being so stupid. She's just a girl. I said that didn't matter because she always made comments about my physical appearance and how she was going to steal me from him. He promised he would talk to her and tell her to lay off. But this did the exact opposite. The next day, I get a DM from her saying, so I heard I make you feel uncomfortable? I didn't respond to that and I showed it to my boyfriend. My boyfriend just said, don't worry about it, just ignore her. Then she sent another message saying, I'm sorry if I intimidate you. I was so upset that I replied saying, you definitely don't intimidate me. You constantly objectify me and that's completely unacceptable. Then she sent me a poop emoji. And that was it. The next time I saw her, I purposely did not even look her way. This was at a party and there were tons of people, but she managed to follow me around the whole night and asked me why I wasn't talking to her. Finally, she grabbed me and kissed me. Part 3 is story time about how my boyfriend's best friend kissed me. Should I tell him? And she's a girl. Disclaimer, is not my story time. It's not on Instagram. During the party, she just kept following me around. She would ask me over and over why I wasn't talking to her, but of course I just kept ignoring her. I finally went over to the kitchen to grab a drink, and that's when she grabbed me, turns me around, and just puts her face on mine. She stuck her tongue all the way down my throat. It was disgusting. And she had a really strong hold on me, so I couldn't push her off right away. To tell you that we struggled is an understatement. And I finally got her off of my face after like 30 seconds. I pushed her so hard she fell backwards. And I ran straight to my boyfriend and told him what happened. Thankfully, he was really upset with her and went straight to talk to her. Honestly, part of me thought that he was just gonna take her side. We both went to the kitchen and he asked her what her problem was. That's when she told my boyfriend that she was convinced that I liked her and that for some reason I was just denying it because I wanted to play hard. By the way, she did have a few drinks, so I guess it could be that. I told her that she was actually hallucinating and that I did not have feelings for her. I also told her not to ever touch me again. My boyfriend told her not to come around anymore, but it doesn't stop there. He actually tried to kiss me again later on. Part 4 is up. Story time about how my boyfriend's best friend kissed me. Should I tell him? And she's a girl. Disclaimer, is not my story time. It's not even on Instagram. She promised she wouldn't try to kiss me again, but she lied. Just a few days later, my boyfriend had forgiven her. She made up a whole story to him that she was depressed about another girl and that somehow I reminded her of the other girl. Then my boyfriend said, do you mind if she comes over? And I told him as long as she didn't try to touch me, everything would be fine. This time I was gonna defend myself. Do you see where this is going? A few of my boyfriend's friends showed up and then she showed up last. And as soon as she saw me, she came over and tried to hug me. I told her hugging was not necessary for an apology, that her words were fine. She then apologizes. Not 2 hours later, while everyone is in the backyard, I go to the kitchen. And she follows me again. This time she kissed me, but it was much quicker and I didn't have to push her off. Then she said, what, are you gonna run and tell your boyfriend again? Instead, I smacked her. really, really hard. So hard, you could see my palm print on her face. Then she apologized and begged me not to tell my boyfriend. He's afraid of losing his friendship. And I actually did feel bad for her for a second, but I'm not sure anymore. Should I tell my boyfriend or should I keep this to myself? Bye.
Story time about how my best friend got my house raided. So a little background information, I was 16 and in 11th grade, and we're gonna call my best friend Jenna. Jenna and I have been on and off friends since elementary school. Now, the reason why we were on and off friends was because Jenna was the type of person who ended up in drama all the time. And coincidentally, anytime that I would stop being her friend, I would be in no drama. Now, there have been multiple times where I've tried to break off our friendship for good, but Jenna, of course, was the type of girl who would threaten to unalive herself whenever things didn't go her way. And I low-key have a savior complex. Also, I literally lived right across the street from her. So it was very hard to cut this friendship off. Well, anyways, fast forward, so her and I are friends, which also wasn't good because she was a very bad influence on me. For example, I didn't have a driver's license, but I had a car. So of course I would go pick her up and her and I would fuck shit up together, aka do bad things. Well, the one night I let her drive and she ended up going to my ex-boyfriend's house like for Part 2 about how my best friend got my house raided. So like I said, no license, but I had a car and I let her drive that night. And she went to my ex-boyfriend's house. Now, her and him used to be close whenever him and I were dating. And I didn't think anything of it until she called him and she kept telling him to come outside of his house so we could fight him. And I'm telling her to stop, but she just keeps laughing the whole time and she always does shit like this. And I was tired of being pulled into shit like this because then I got named the psycho stalker girl. So then I find out that after she went home that night, she texted my ex with this whole elaborate story about how I was the one who made her drive to his house and say all that shit. So fast forward, her and I got into it at school because I told a counselor that she was threatening to unalive herself because I was really worried for her. But then she starts posting stuff about my mental health on social media, saying things like, oh, she has zebra stripe arms. And I fought her after that. Because the only reason why I told our counselor is because I gave a shit about her mental health, like for part 3. Part 3 about how my best friend got my house raided. So like I said, she posted stuff online about my mental health, and then her and I, we ended up fighting at school, and her mom decided to press charges, but then I ended up showing the cops everything that she had said to me online and all the bullying that she was doing, and how she would literally blackmail me into being friends with her. And this made Jenna and Jenna's mom super unhappy, so they ended up filing a false report about me to the police, saying that I have illegal stuff in my house, and I do this, and I do that, and I plan on unaliving my mom. Like, what the So in the middle of the night, my whole family and I are woken up by this loud banging on our front door. So my mom hurry up, go open the door, and they're saying that they have a warrant, and come to find out, the only thing that they could find were a bunch of empty vapes, which my mom was not happy about. And yeah, my mom and I's relationship is super rocky sometimes, but I would never try to unalive her.
Story time about how my husband makes me pay for everything and still controls all of my money while he's totally unemployed and broke. Disclaimers are not my story time, send me on Instagram. My husband and I have been married for 6 years. 2 of those years we were separated, and we recently got back together last year. He lost his job during COVID, so when we got back together, he didn't have a lot of money. Obviously, I didn't really mind. I was just happy we were getting back together. And if you're wondering why we separated, it's because he got really jealous and controlling of everything I ever did. When we got back together, I told him that he needed to change that. And I really could see a change in him this time around. The only problem was that he refused to get a job. I have a really good salary. I make about $80,000 a month. Theoretically, I could totally support him. When I asked him why he didn't want to get a job, he told me that it just wasn't for him. And he also told me that he wanted some time off and he just wanted to travel. Well, this is when things start to get complicated. When we got back together, he was living with his parents, so he ended up moving into my very nice apartment. I live in a really beautiful high-rise. I have a doorman, a gym, indoor pool, and then he moved in with all of his junk. I had to start paying for everything. Anytime he wanted to go to dinner or order food or buy groceries, I was the one footing the bill. He even uses my Amazon account to order whatever he wants. While he was at home playing video games, I was in my office working my ass off. But things get worse. Part 2 is up. Every time about how my husband controls all my money while he's unemployed and totally broke. Disclaimers now, I started telling sending me on Instagram. After 3 months of me paying for everything and him using my Amazon account to buy whatever he wanted, including gaming consoles, this man had the audacity to tell me that I was spending too much money on my designer bags. Yeah, you heard that right. One day I decided to treat myself for my birthday by getting myself a Chanel bag. As soon as he saw the new purchase, he started acting like I was addicted to shopping. And then he starts bringing up all these other things. How I like going to Starbucks, how I like going to the nail salon, and that's when I realized it. He had access to my bank account. He could see all of the transactions that I was making. And of course he could. I was in my office all day while he had access to my laptop at home. And of course it didn't occur to me to change my passwords. I was actually really shocked when he started bringing all of this up. Then he suggested that I should let him manage my money. And at first I just went with it. Said okay, and that's when he literally took my credit card from me. Then he started moving money around my accounts and started buying crypto. After 2 months of that, I was done. I asked him to give me my credit card back, which he did. He started guilting me into feeling like I shouldn't go to the nail salon and do these little small things that make me feel good about myself. He was brainwashing me. A few weeks later, it was time for me to upgrade my car. So I decided to get a Tesla. And when I told him, he got so angry. I could see in his face that he was so envious. He spent 2 hours trying to talk me out of getting the stupid Tesla. But the very next day, I went straight to the Tesla store and bought my car. When I finally got the car, he started driving it all over town before I drove it. Part 3 is up. Story time about how my husband controls all my money while he's totally broke and unemployed. Disclaimer, is not my story time, it's on Instagram. After he started driving my brand new Tesla before I did, I started getting really snippy with him. I was always angry and in a bad mood. That's when he started getting even more controlling and this time jealous again. He started to suspect that I was cheating on him. He started showing up to my office to just check on me. By the way, I'm totally aware that if I leave him, he has no money. So of course he's gonna be totally controlling of me. Unfortunately, this is when we started getting into really big fights. I reproached him for everything. Him controlling all of my money and literally telling me what I could or could not buy. And I finally mustered up the courage to ask him to get a job again. And I told him that if he didn't get a job to start paying for half of the bills and everything else, that I would simply file for divorce. He started to cry and he threw a tantrum, but eventually he said yes. Do you think that he moved a muscle to go get a job? No, he didn't. So I took it upon myself to see if my company was hiring. And they did. So now he's got a really good job because of me. I revoked all his access to my accounts and I have full control of all the crypto. Now I give him a weekly allowance. Cannot wait until he starts getting paid. My parents think I should get a divorce, but I'm not sure. What should I do?
Story time about how my grandma almost got me grounded. So a little background information, I was 14 and in 8th grade. And there was this boy that I really liked who lived like 10 minutes away from me. So the one night he asked me if I wanted to hang out. And my mom was strict about me not hanging out with people after 7 o'clock at night. Especially a boy. I wasn't even allowed to hang out with boys. And my grandma, my mom, and my brother and I all lived together. And we all had our own rooms. Mine was on the first floor of the house, so I snuck out the window and I went and hung out with him. So I snuck out at around 3 and came back at around 4 a.m. And my grandma comes into my room to wake me up for school. And I guess that I had been laying on my side and my hair was like pulled up. Because literally all I remember waking up to is her smacking me up out of my sleep and screaming at me because there was a hickey on my neck. She's like, I'm telling your mom whenever she gets home, your window's gonna be screwed shut. And I keep telling her it's not a hickey, so she calls my brother over. And he's like, yeah, that's definitely a hickey. Because he likes to kiss her ass. Like for part 2. Part 2 about how my grandma almost got me grounded. So like I said, she's like, I'm telling your mom, and I keep telling her that it's not a hickey. And thankfully, my mom already went to work. She had work at 6 a.m. So I get on the bus, I go to school, and I'm talking to my friend and telling her about how I'm literally going to be crucified whenever I get home. And she told me about how her older sister was in like the same situation that I'm in now. So she texted her older sister asking what she did because she never got caught. And I was like, okay, well, if she used makeup, my mom's going to find out because she's not dumb. Well, apparently her older sister burnt herself with a curling iron. Yes, literally burnt herself, but she ended up getting away with it. So fast forward, I get home at around 3 o'clock and I sneak in through the back door so that way my grandma won't see that I came in the house because she literally would have made me sit in the living room until my mom got home. So I go upstairs and I burn myself with a curling iron, which is not fun. Like for part 3. Part 3 about how my grandma almost got me grounded. So like I said, I snuck in through the back door so that way my grandma wouldn't see me because if she saw me, she would have made me wait in the living room with her until my mom got home. So, you know, burnt myself with the curling iron and my mom gets home. And since I'm on the first floor, I can literally hear my grandma talking to my mom and my brother, of course. My grandma's like, yeah, she has hickeys all over her neck. Which is literally an exaggeration because there was one small one. So my mom calls me out to the living room. I go out and she's like, all right, show it to me. And I'm like, show you what? She's like, don't play stupid. Your grandma already told me the whole situation. And I was like, Mom, I literally burnt myself with a curling iron. And my grandma's like screaming and freaking out because I'm lying. She's like, you better tell your mother the truth right now. Da 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 da. So I show the burn to my mom. She looks at my grandma and she's like, so you're gonna tell me that's not a burn on her neck? And she was like, that's not how it looked this morning, blah, blah, blah. So I got away with it, but now my grandma literally stalks me to see if I'm doing anything wrong so she can tell my mom. Is a $40 foundation better than a $9 foundation? The two foundations that we have going up against each other are the She Glam Complexion Pro and the Airbrush Flawless Foundation. This at least looks like it's $30. So on this side, I'm going to do the She Glam foundation, and on the other side, I'm going to do the Charlotte Tilbury foundation. First things first, both of these foundations claim to have a matte finish that lasts all day, and it is supposed to feel like nothing is on your face. Also, both of these are supposed to be full coverage, and that's good to put to the test today because I do have a few blemishes. I am in literal shock right now. This is a dupe for the Charlotte Tilbury foundation. $9, $40, no beauty filter. They both look and feel the exact same way. Run. Do not walk, run. And everybody can run because there are 30 shades. Like, I'm sorry, you will never catch me spending $40 on a foundation ever again.
Story time about how I found out I was born from incest. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I sent me on Instagram. Growing up, I always wondered why we didn't have a family. I mean, I had both my parents, but we never visited my grandparents, cousins, parents until I turned 15. That's when I started getting curious and I started asking questions. Finally, I asked my parents about my grandparents. I remember meeting them when I was a kid. That's when my dad got really upset. He told me to stop asking questions because we didn't need family. I immediately went onto Facebook. It wasn't hard to find my aunt, my mom's sister. I messaged her and she told me something disturbing. She said my mom and dad were related. They were half brother and sister. Part 2 is up. Story time about how I found out I was born out of incest. Disclaimer, is not my story time. I sent me on Instagram. When my aunt told me the disturbing truth. My mom and dad were half brother and sister. According to my aunt, when they were in high school, they always spent time together. Everyone just thought they were best friends. But apparently my aunt walked in on them making out one day. When she told her parents, my grandparents, they obviously freaked out and tried to separate them. That's when they tried to send my dad to a military school. 1 week before they sent him, my mom and dad decided to run away together. They finally ran away and never spoke to their family again until I was born. My grandmother begged them to get rid of me. My parents kept me. Part 3 is up. Story time about how I found out I was born out of incest. Disclaimer, is not my story time. It's on Instagram. After I was born, my grandmother begged my mom to give me up for adoption. My parents were both 18 when they had me. Not only were they jobless, they were also half brother and sister. Since my parents had ran away from home, my grandparents didn't want to help them financially. Luckily, my parents started their own business and they are successful today. Finding out that my parents are half brother and sister, I understand our family history and why we were never close to our family. Finally confronted my parents and they denied everything. I decided I'd do the same thing they did. I ran away for 3 nights, hid in my bestie's basement. Finally, my parents came over and told me the entire truth. My parents do love me, but they keep me away from my family. What should I do? Should I forgive them?
Story time about how this girl and her boyfriend beat me up. So a little background information, I was in 11th grade and I was 17 years old. And in the summer, my friend and I went to go and watch fireworks for the 4th of July at this park. And most of the people there went to a completely different school. But we ended up meeting this group of guys and I was really vibing with the one guy who was there. He was super cute, super chill, and we got along great. And I just want to put this out there. I did not think to ask that he had a girlfriend because he was being super flirtatious and just really wasn't acting like he had a girlfriend. I literally just hate how we have to ask people if they're in relationships now because they don't want to be honest or loyal. And then we look like the bad guys because they were dishonest. Anyway, so him and I start to hang out a lot and he really likes me. I really like him. And we went to this football game at his school and we ended up doing the nasty. After that, I'm in the bleachers with my friends and one of my friends tells me, yeah, he has a girlfriend. So she couldn't have told me this before we did the nasty. Anyways, like for part 2. About how this guy and his girlfriend literally beat me up. So like I said, him and I did the nasty at the football game and then I go onto the bleachers with my friends and she tells me that he has a girlfriend. But I'm not gonna lie, at this point we had already been talking for 2 months and I really didn't care because I liked him and I wasn't just gonna turn my feelings off. First of all, I do not owe that girl any loyalty. Number 2, we were already intimate with each other, so I don't know what could make this situation worse than it already was. I mean, I did confront him about it and he told me that he was going to break up with her for me. So I believed him. I was like, whatever, I'm just going to wait for him to break it off with her and I'm still going to talk to him. So eventually he literally made me wait for like 2 more months. So what did I do? I told his girlfriend everything. I'm not gonna lie, it's not even that I wanted to be a good person. It was literally just to spite him. It's like, yeah, your man wants to be with me. He don't want you. This is the text messages of him telling me that he was going to break up with you. That day he called me and he was like, hey, do you want to hang out? And I was shocked that he did not bring up anything that I said to his girlfriend. Like for part 3. Story time about how my sister sold my nudes. Yes, my own sister. So a little background information, I was in 12th grade and I was pretty popular. And my sister, on the other hand, she was in 9th grade. I'm not even saying this to boost my ego, but she was jealous of me and everybody could tell. Mainly because of the fact that she didn't have her high school glow up, she low-key still looked like a 6th grader. And there were very few guys who gave her attention, and some of the guys would even tell her that I was hotter than her. So that did not help the situation at all. Not like I even paid attention to any of these guys because I had a boyfriend. And my sister and I still shared a room even though our brothers got their own rooms. So she could literally go through my shit anytime she wanted. Well, since we shared a room and I'd never thought that she would sell my nudes, sometimes I would take these exposing pictures of myself while she was in the room. Well, she had this one friend named Jessica who also was weirdly obsessed with me. One night she was saying how funny it would be to sell someone's nudes, like part 2 about how my sister sold my nudes. So like I said, my sister had this friend and the one night they were talking about how funny it would be to sell somebody's pics. We all laughed, joked about it, the conversation was over and done with. I thought that was it. Like, in all honesty, I thought it was one of those things where you guys make plans to do something and then after the conversation you never talk about it again and you never actually do what you said you were going to do because it was so out of pocket. So my sister's friend slept over that night and I woke up, went to school earlier because I have volunteer work to do, so my sister usually just takes the bus. Well, I accidentally left my computer at school, so I called my sister, asked her if she could grab it and bring it into school. Now, my computer is connected to my phone. Well, I guess they decided to be little creeps, and they went on my computer, and they found my pictures, and they sent them to themselves. And since my phone and computer are hooked up, I was able to see that they sent the pictures to themselves. So I started blowing up her phone, but by first period, I had a bunch of people telling me that they were about to buy my pictures. My sister literally made an ad and put it on Snapchat. My boyfriend broke up.
The asshole for wanting to expose my lying, cheating mother. A month ago, I borrowed my mom's phone and she had no idea, but I looked at all of her apps and found that she was cheating with multiple men. I'm 26 years old and my parents have now been married for 30 years. I actually got separated when I graduated from high school, but then they got back together a few years later. My mom has always been the one that wants to separate my dad, but he keeps wanting to get back together with her. My dad is actually in love with this woman. He adores her. He does everything for her. He's super affectionate with her, loves to take her out on dates, gives her so much of his time, and she still doesn't appreciate it. I've always been closer to my dad than my mom. My mom's always trying to find an excuse to go party with her friends, but now I know why. Like I said, I ended up borrowing her phone and she probably didn't expect me to go snooping. And honestly, it wasn't even my intention. I'm scrolling on her phone and I see the app Tinder. I nearly fell out of my seat. So I quickly scrolled through everything and started taking pictures. My mom was sending nudes to random men. Part 2 is up. I the asshole for wanting to expose my lying, cheating mother. That's when I saw that she was sending nudes to men on different apps. Not only was she on Tinder, she was also on Bumble and an app for older people. Mind you, my father is still in love with this woman. I managed to take pictures of everything on the apps. Here's the worst part. Start going through her messages and that's when I found that she has a boyfriend. At that point, I didn't know how long they'd been together. Now I know that she's been with him for 6 months. So every single time she goes on her weekend trips with her friends, she's actually with her boyfriend. And get this, she uses my dad's money to pay for everything. An entire week passed before I confronted her. First, I didn't know how to confront her, but I had to just do it. Every time I saw my dad, I would start to cry and he was worried about me. I didn't have the heart to tell my dad until I confronted my mom. I went up to her and I showed her all the receipts I had. Then she got pissed at me for looking through her phone. By the way, at this point, I'm still living with my parents. That's when she threatened to kick me out of the house if I told my dad anything. My own mother threatening me. Then she tried to smack me across the face, so I smacked her. Part 3 is up. Am I the asshole for wanting to expose my lying, cheating mother? After she slapped me, I slapped her back. And I slapped her so hard she actually fell on the floor. I instantly felt bad and tried to apologize. That's when she started to cry and I started to cry. I asked her to just be honest with me and tell me the truth. She told me that she wasn't in love with my dad anymore, but that she felt bad for him because he was still in love with her. And that she'd been dating this new guy for 6 months. She even confessed that she was addicted to going on dating apps and flirting with men. That's when I told her she needed to tell my dad. That she needed to stop using his money to take her boyfriend out. Then another confession. She had spent over $25,000 on hotels that she would book for her and her new boyfriend. And apparently this guy was broke. He couldn't pay for himself. She tried to negotiate with me. If I don't tell my dad, she'd break up with her boyfriend and stop using the apps. I mean, she's my mother and I don't want to cause her pain, but it's my dad. I ended up telling her that I wouldn't tell my dad. But 2 nights ago, my dad went on a work trip. My mom is so stupid, she actually snuck in her boyfriend through her window. I heard them doing the dirty all night. Now she's begging me again not to tell my dad. I'm planning on telling my dad tonight. I'll have to keep you guys updated. Give me advice. I've been cheating on my husband for 10 years and he's still still doesn't know. Disclaimer is not my story time instead of Instagram. I'm a serial cheater, and I actually don't have any shame about it. You see, what makes me happy in life is other men that are not my husband. You see, in order to get out of the misery that I was living in, I had to marry up. And marrying up sometimes means marrying an ugly man. Me, on the other hand, I'm actually really beautiful. And I'm not just saying that. I've been in beauty pageants for about 5 years now, and I've won everything. I grew up really poor, and I just didn't want to be in that situation. I was working at a gym when I met my now husband. He reeked of money. Nice car, big watch. So I put my seductress powers to work, and he literally fell in love with me within a month. I wasn't even attracted to him. He's kind of ugly. I'm just being honest. I started cheating on him the minute we started dating. I even had a boyfriend at the time. I broke up with the boyfriend to make room for my fiance, but I kept my boyfriend as a side piece. Coincidentally, I became a sugar baby at the same time. So I had a bunch of old guys giving me money and my fiance giving me money. And my whole plan was to just basically save up enough money so that I could just be independently wealthy without needing any man. But the money is just too good with my husband. You see, let me explain. He works in illegal things. Part 2 is I've been cheating on my ugly husband for 10 years and he still doesn't know. Disclaimer is not my story time instead of Instagram. So my plan was to have all my sugar daddies and my fiance at the time basically just give me a lot of money. Eventually I would just save up enough money to be independently wealthy without needing a man. But when I moved in with my fiance, who is now my husband, realized that the luxury and opulence of his life was just on a whole other level. The thing is, he kept a few things from me before the wedding. After the wedding, he added me to his will. And if anything happens to him, guess how much I'd be set to inherit? $40 million. Yeah. Just 40 million. After the wedding, he also told me about his yacht, a separate island he owns, and his house in the US and in Canada. So you see, my life with him is just completely extravagant. We fly literally wherever we want, whenever we want. The thing is, he actually is pretty jealous. So I'm surprised he hasn't caught me cheating at this point, but I'm pretty good at it. You see, I have a personal trainer. He acts gay in front of my husband, but he's totally straight. And this is actually the ex that I was with before I got with my husband. And because my husband travels a lot, I pretty much travel wherever I want to, separately. And this is when I take advantage and just basically hoe out. No, I'm not saying this is a great thing, but if you're poor, marry up. And if you guys want to comfort me in the comments, you totally can. I know I take advantage of men. They also take advantage of me. It's transactional. And if you're married, I bet he's cheating on you. Or she. Watch your back. Bye.
Story time about my toxic ex-best friend. So a little background information. I had a very close guy friend who we're gonna call Max. Now, Max was 2 years older than me, but due to our families being super close, him and I became best friends. Growing up, I saw him as kind of an older brother. And then eventually, as we grew up, I saw him as my best friend. Until I realized that he was actually a terrible person. And I missed all of the signs that he was not a real friend. Like one, our first fight, I told him something that I didn't want anybody else knowing. And what do you know, right after I tell him, my family knows, his family knows, my crush knows, all of our friends know. After this, I probably should have distanced myself, but he apologized and we became friends again. That was sign number 1. Sign number 2, his huge change in attitude. 1 second, he would be extremely rude to me, and then he would be this really sweet and caring guy, and his apologies were the best. So it was really hard not to forgive him. He was like a master manipulator. Number 3, we only talked whenever it was convenient for him. Like seriously, we would never talk unless he needed something, like for part 2. Part 2 about my toxic ex-best friend. I think we left off on sign number 3, which was the only time that we would talk was when it was convenient for him. He would never reach out, which left me being the one who was constantly trying to preserve our friendship or whatever was left of it. Like all of our messages were literally me, and it made me seem really needy and like I was putting in way too much effort because he would literally answer with the most simple messages. Like, yeah, okay. Sure. And he would only talk to me whenever he wasn't with his friends. Sign number 4. It felt like he was embarrassed of me. Now, I know that I was 2 years younger than him, but we were still friends, and I really don't think that's that much of a difference. Like, he would never want to be seen with me. The last sign, he would literally always talk about me behind my back. And I thought this was just rumors at first, until finally several people told me that it was not a rumor. He would say things like, oh, she's ugly, she's so immature, she's annoying and childish, she's so annoying. And then I finally decided to cut him off. Because if the bad outweighed the good, was it really worth keeping that person in my life? Story time about how my sister went missing on our family vacation. So little background information, my sister, my family, and I decided to stay at a beautiful luxury resort in the Caribbean. Now my sister was quite a few years older than I was, but I was super excited because my sister and I were finally going to be able to spend time together after her being away at college for what felt like so long. Which her and I did spend a lot of time together, but my sister was living her best life. She was young, smart, outgoing, beautiful, and everything else under the sun. Allison, aka my sister, was the girl who in a room full of 100 other people, she was the one who caught your eye. And of course, all of the guys were drooling over her. There were the boys that were her age, and then there were the older men, and then there were even some of the married men. Gross, I know.
and even some of the women. But she had 2 little vacation situationships going on. And like I said, she was living her best life until she wasn't. But one night my sister Allison ended up not coming back to the room. And that was the plot of Saint X, a new show on Hulu with new episodes every Wednesday, streaming now.
Story time about the boy who pretended to like me to get closer to my best friend. A little background information. It was the summer before my freshman year of high school, and my best friend and I got bored of hanging out with the same people, so we got a membership to a new pool. And this one was closer to one of our rival schools, so a lot of people that we didn't know went there. Well, the one day while we're there, we meet this group of boys. And by the way, my friend is super pretty. Like, all the guys immediately gravitate towards her, and I'm kind of like the duff, aka designated ugly fat friend. Anyways, while she's over there talking to all the boys, I'm sitting down at one of the tables. And one of the boys from the group comes over to me and starts talking to me. And he was being super sweet. And then he's like, oh, I don't know why all of them are over there talking to her. Like, she's not even that pretty. He was like, to be honest, you're way better looking than her. Now listen, I know I might seem like a bad friend for this, but I never had that male validation before, so that kind of made me feel good. Well, fast forward, his best friend and my best friend start dating, like for part 2. Part 2 about how this guy used me to get with my best friend. Like I said, they started dating. The boy that I was talking to at the pool, we're gonna call him Luke. Well, Luke's best friend was dating my best friend. Fast forward 2 months, Luke's saying how he wants to date me and stuff like that, but it's not the right time. And every time that I would ask Luke to hang out, he would only hang out if my best friend was there. Red motherfucking flag alert, bitch. Anyways, I didn't see that red flag. So Luke and his best friend go to this party. And apparently I was told that there was this girl there that was really hot. And Luke was saying to his best friend, oh, you should hook up with her. She's totally into you. Your girlfriend won't find out because she doesn't even know any of the people at this party. So he hooks up with the girl there. Then Luke calls me and says, OMG, like he cheated on your best friend. So I immediately call my best friend to tell her. And because she likes to talk to Luke about all her problems, she calls him. So he goes over there to comfort her. I didn't hear anything from them till a week after. My best friend posted him on her story and goes, my new boo. Hi everyone! So today I'm going to be trying to do a natural makeup, and if you've seen on my page, I really don't do natural makeup looks. And I don't really like full coverage looks for going out of my house. So anytime I do my makeup, it's literally just for TikTok. So today we're going to be trying out a natural makeup routine for me. And if you guys have any tips, please drop them down below. So first we're just putting on a primer. I got some blood work done today, so I'm going to take this off real quick. There's a whole ass bruise right there. Ciao. Anyways, okay, so I'm going to be using the tinted moisturizer. Don't know if this is my shade. Now we're moving on to the eyebrows. Now I'm just going to put on some blush. Now some bronzer. Now I'm just putting this lip oil on. Mascara. This is the finished look. Let me know if you guys have any tips. Story time. My boyfriend cheated on me with my best friend. So my boyfriend and I have been dating for 2 years, but we were on and off all the time. It was a super toxic relationship. Like, he would try to get with other girls and I would try to get with other guys to make him jealous, blah, blah, blah. Well, a week before Christmas, him and I broke up again. And I had my best friend sleep over that whole week because her parents were in Ireland. And my boyfriend lived right down the street from me. Like, it was probably a 2-minute walk to his house. Well, for the first 3 nights, my best friend would go on a jog every night and she would be gone for like 2 hours. I would literally have to go unlock the door at 1 in the morning for her to get back in my house. Well, I think the 3rd night that she slept over, she came back in different clothes. And I realized that the sweatshirt she was wearing was my boyfriend's favorite sweatshirt. But I didn't really think anything of it because she never really showed interest in my boyfriend. But clearly I was oblivious. Anyways. So that same night, I wake up in the middle of the night and she's on the phone with someone. And it sounded exactly like my boyfriend. So I asked her who it was, but she couldn't give me an answer, like for part 2. Part 2 of how my boyfriend cheated on me with my best friend. So she told me not to worry about it and I was like, alright, whatever. So the next day my boyfriend shows up at my house asking to get back together. Not a surprise, by the way. And of course I said, okay, we can be back together, blah, blah, blah. So that night while I'm in my room, my best friend's on the phone and she has her AirPods in so I couldn't hear who it was. And she was like, okay, I'll be there in 5 minutes. And when I asked her where she was going, she wouldn't tell me. Well, she left her phone at my house. And because she usually tells me everything, I thought that something sus was going on. So I went through her phone. And I see that she's been texting this guy Jay a lot. And as I'm going through their conversation, there's one text that says, "I don't care if she finds out. Just sneak over to my house while you're there." So I check the phone numbers, and obviously it's my boyfriend. And her parents are really strict, like she was only supposed to be at my house that week, nowhere else. So I may have made up some stories that she had drugs in her bag, and that she was forcing me to do drugs with her. So her parents came home early from their trip, they sent her to military school, and I broke up with my boyfriend. Part 2 about how I got my toxic ex-best friend jumped. So like I said, the only thing that was stopping me from not being her friend was the blackmail that she had. Every time that I pissed her off, or even just randomly, she would be like, "Oh, I'm gonna send this out. I'm gonna expose you." She was just overall a shitty friend. So I had an exposing account on Instagram where I would expose people in my class. It got banned, but she DM'd the account the blackmail. Little did she know it was literally me who was running it. Obviously, I didn't post it, but I showed one of my friends, and we kind of made a plan to get rid of the blackmail. So my birthday was coming up, and I was going to Disney, and my mom said that I could invite 2 friends. Originally, I wasn't going to invite Tessa, but since I had this plan, I invited her and one of my other friends. On the 3rd night, my friend and I decided to take our plan into action. Tessa was sleeping, so I went on her phone, and I went and deleted all the pictures, like for part 3. Part 3 about how I got my toxic ex-best friend jumped. So like I said, on the 3rd night, she was sleeping, so we went on her phone. I deleted all of the blackmail that she had on me, and I even went a step further and screenshotted all of the nudes that she was sending back and forth with older guys, and these guys were way older than her, like way older. And I sent them to myself and deleted the text off of her phone. Fast forward, we drop her off at her house. I stay over my friend's house, and we decide that we're going to post everything to my exposing page. And we also came up with a really good idea. Why not send this to Tessa's parents? So we sent them to her parents. And guys, when I tell you this exposing page had so many people on it, it really did. Somebody was like, "OMG, like, please send a face reveal. Like, I won't tell anybody." So what did I do? I sent a picture of Tessa, and that person posted it to their Snapchat story. Fast forward to the first day of school. We're outside for gym class, and 3 girls beat her ass. Story time about how my best friend was obsessed with me. And I'm not saying obsessed as in, oh my god, like, you know, she does her hair like me. No, I'm saying in a creepy way. So a little background information, I was 14 and it was the summer before I was going into high school, and I had this best friend who we're gonna call Madison. Now, I met Madison like a month before school ended. She was one of those kids that nobody really liked and nobody wanted to be near, but we were partnered up in this one class, and she's actually really funny. So since summer just started, I invited her over to have a sleepover at my house. Everything went well, we were swimming, we watched movies. But my house was in a really wooded area, so if you had certain phone carriers, you wouldn't get any reception. So she asked if she could use my iPad to text her dad, and it was like 11 o'clock at night, so I let her use it, and then we went to sleep. Well, I woke up around 3 in the morning because my phone kept going off, like for part 2. Part 2 about how my best friend was obsessed with me in a creepy way. So like I said, I woke up at 3 in the morning because my phone kept going off, and it wasn't dinging or anything, it was just the light flashing when it would go off and on. So I look around for Madison, and then I see my bathroom light is on but the door is shut. So I just brush it off and I go on my phone, and I see a bunch of text messages that were sent from me, but they weren't sent from me. Like, obviously, somebody had went on my iPad and started sending people messages. So I look at these messages, and it's all texting Madison. And I kid you not, it's literally pictures of me while I'm sleeping that she sent to herself. Like, there was a picture of my hair, a picture of one of my birthmarks. And then on her side of the nightstand, there was literally a lock of my hair. Like, she cut my hair off. And it was in a Ziploc bag. So at this point, I'm actually really creeped out, and I go and tell my mom. And my mom talked to her mom, and apparently she's done this before. Here we go with another toxic best friend story time. So a little background information. So a couple of years ago, I became best friends with this one girl who we're going to call Sammy. Every year, her family would go on a camping trip, and every year I couldn't go. Something would always come up, even if it was last minute. Well, this year, finally, nothing was standing in the way, so I could go on this freaking camping trip. And we had literally been planning this for like 6 months. So this plan was we would go up there in the afternoon after I was done with work and after she was done with school. Well, then she calls me and she asks me if I can call off work and go up a day early with her. And And I told her, no, I can't do that. I already took off a bunch of time because I was sick and for my sister's wedding. So I need the money. So after I tell her I can't go up on Thursday, I would rather go on Friday like we said, she responds with, well, we're going on Thursday and either you can take the day off and join or not. And then I told her I'm not driving when the whole plan was for you to drive, like for part 2 about my extremely toxic best friend. So like I said, she tried to talk me into taking off work so that way we could go up on Thursday, but I told her no, I would rather stick with the plan and go up Friday. And then she says, well, you can do that, but we're all going up on Thursday, so you're gonna have to find your own ride. And then I told her, I'm not driving up there. I don't know this place. So at that point, I was like, fuck it. If they leave without me, they live without me. I do not care at this point. And I pretty much said that. If you want to go without me, then go without me. And she called me and she was like, you're being extremely rude. A little background information on Sammy. She was a super selfish, self-centered person. And she has like only child syndrome. Every time we hung out, we had to do what she wanted to do. I was super annoyed about this because I had already planned for this vacation. Meaning I took the time off work. I rearranged my whole schedule. And now I don't really know if I want to be friends with her. What do you guys think?
Story time about how I found my uncle sleeping with my best friend. So a little background information. I was 18 at the time and a freshman in college. My uncle was a National Guard, and we were the same age, we went to the same school, and we also had the same friends. And while he was away, I had made one friend that he didn't know about. Her and I became best friends, we got into the same college, and we were in the same dorm room together. Well, the one day my uncle came to my college to surprise me. I ran up to him, I gave him a big hug, and my best friend was super confused because I had never introduced them. And when I introduced them, there was this weird, awkward vibe. So all three of us went back to the dorm room, and I asked her if it was okay that he spent the night, because I didn't want to be that person to just invade her space. So she ended up saying yes, and eventually we all got really hungry, and we all wanted Chick-fil-A, so I went and I left them all alone in the room together. Like for part 2. Part 2 about how I found my uncle sleeping with my best friend. So like I said, I went to go get us Chick-fil-A and I left them in the dorm all alone together. While I was waiting in line, I called them to ask what they wanted and nobody answered the phone. So I was like, okay, whatever, you know, it's fine. They're probably just busy talking. So I low-key took a long time because I went to the grocery store to get some cookies. I was just craving them. So then I get back to the dorm room. As soon as I open the door, I see both of them unclothed on top of each other on the bed, doing the nasty. So for some reason, I had a broom and I threw it at my uncle and I went to my friend's apartment that night. And when I told my mom about it, she said that it was my fault because weirdly enough, they praised all the boys in my family.
Story time about how he cheated on his baby mama with me. So a little background information. There was this boy and we're going to call him John. John and I knew each other through one of our mutual friends. Well, 24/7, John would post sad quotes on his Snapchat story because him and his girlfriend had just broken up. So I decided that I was going to be Captain Save-A-Ho and be there for him, telling him it was okay and that everything happens for a reason. Well, eventually John had developed a huge crush on me. Like, he would flirt with me 24/7, sending me all these cute emojis. And of course, my dumbass fell for it. So after talking for a little bit, him and I started dating. Well, the one day I was on Snapchat going through his story, and he was posting a bunch of funny memes on his story, and I was just laughing until I got to the last thing that he posted on his story. It was this picture of a baby girl saying, "I can't wait to meet you from Dada." So with my crazy ass, I jumped on the phone and started cussing him out. And then he goes, "What are you talking about? That's my little sister." Like for part 2. Part 2 about how he cheated on his baby mama with me. So like I said, when I confronted him about it, he said that it was a picture of his baby sister. Always with the Alabama shit. For what reason, I don't know. But he calls me the next day and he starts apologizing about everything. And then he decides to make a new Snapchat account and starts talking to me on there, thinking that I was just gonna block his other account. He posts a picture of his baby mama. So at this point, my Virgo self and I were done with the bullshit. By the way, he's a Gemini, so if that doesn't explain it, I don't know what will. So I start dating my new man, and I commented on all of his posts. I guess I'm not surprised she's not the only bitch you're fucking with. And if you try lying, I'm going to spill the tea. Like, I just think that it's really funny how females just think that their men are so loyal, even when you literally expose their man with every piece of evidence. Well, the girl who sent this in has a special message for all of us. I promise you that men ain't shit. Thank you for listening to my TED Talk. Story time about how my boyfriend found out that I was cheating on him with his best friend. So a little background information. We're gonna call my boyfriend Tyler. Tyler and I had been dating since he was 16 and I was 13. And now it was my freshman year in high school and his senior year. And we're gonna call his best friend Jaden. Now there was one really big problem with Tyler and I's relationship. I was pretty much dating Jaden too. Now if you don't get what I mean by that, Jaden was there for literally every single thing that we did in our relationship. Anytime I would invite Tyler over, guess who was walking in right behind him? Jaden. Anytime that Tyler and I went on dates, guess who was there? Jaden. And there wouldn't even be another girl there. He would literally just third wheel on our dates. And I talked to Tyler about it before and he's like, well, I don't know what you want me to do. He's my best friend. So fast forward, the one day Tyler and Jaden are both over my house, like for part 2. Part 2 about how my boyfriend found out that I was cheating on him with his best friend. So like I said, Jaden and Tyler are both at my house, and Tyler ends up getting a call, and it was his mom telling him that his brother had just passed away. So Tyler told Jaden that he needed to find a ride home, and after that, Tyler left immediately. Now me, I do not know what the hell to do, because Jaden and I had never been left alone before, and it wasn't really because Tyler didn't trust us. It was more of though we didn't really have a reason to be alone together. So that night he was supposed to wait for my parents to get home so that way they could drive him. But I ended up getting him an Uber because he said that he liked me and I did not know what to do. Fast forward, while my boyfriend is in the grieving stages, I was messing with his best friend behind his back. And the one day he had walked in on us doing spicy things. And after he had his whole family posting things about me on Facebook saying that I was a whore and everything.
Story time about the scariest night of my life. A lot of background information. So the one weekend, my sister and I decided that we were going to go to my stepdad's. And her best friend was going to come also. I was around 13 at the time. Well, my stepdad and my mom had been broken up for about a few months. But my dad was okay with us going to our stepdad's because he had been with our mom for around 7 years and he's always been good to us. And my stepdad's was 2 hours away. So fast forward, we get to his house and my sister and her friend wanted to go to a party. Now, me being older now, I knew that they didn't want to bring me because they were around 16 and I was only 13, but I still tried to tag along. Well, they weren't really talking to me or anything, and I hadn't seen my mom in almost a year. So I told my stepdad that I wanted to go and see her, which was a super big deal because she absolutely hated my stepdad. And she didn't want him around us. And by the way, she lived like 5 minutes from him. So if she found out that we went all the way up there to see him and not her, she would have flipped. So he drives me to my mom's house, like for part 2. Part 2 about the worst night of my life. So before I got to my mom's house, I called her. And I pretty much just told her that I was with my stepdad and I wanted to come see her. Like I said, she lived 5 minutes away. So as soon as we pull up, she walks outside. And she starts screaming at my stepdad. She's like, those are my kids. You're not allowed to see them, blah, blah, blah. Even though my dad had full custody and he could decide who we could and couldn't see. So after that, we walk in the house. She isn't saying anything. And this house is pretty much like a trap house. There was a knife holding the door shut. Not a kitchen knife, like an actual knife that you stab people with. She's like, you can sit down, make yourself comfortable. And I didn't want to sit down because I saw needles everywhere and I just saw a rat crawl under the couch. So I was like, no, I'm fine. And then she was like, sorry, not everybody can be rich like you. Which, just to make clear, I'm not rich. I just knew that she was doing drugs with her boyfriend in that house. After that, she pulls the knife that was holding the door shut out and points it right at me, like for part 3. 3 about the worst night of my life. So before she points the knife at me, she had been in the kitchen, right? So I went to go and sneak out the door. That's whenever she ran over, ripped the knife out of the door, and pointed it right at me. And she's like screaming a bunch of shit at me. And she's like, oh, what, are you gonna tell your dad that I pointed a knife at you? And I told her, yeah, like, what the fuck do you mean? Am I not gonna tell him? So at this point, she tries to take my phone. And I told her, no, you're not taking my phone. And at this time, my sister's also texting me and yelling at me because she had told me that I should not go to my mom's house. Probably for that exact reason. A few minutes later, she hears her boyfriend pull up. I had never met her boyfriend. Like I said, I haven't seen her in probably almost a year. As soon as she hears him pull up, she looks at me and she says, go out the back door. She literally hurries up, takes me to the back door, and I have to run out the back door. I don't even know where I am. My sister and stepdad were waiting at the gas station across the street, so I ran over there really quickly. And then a few things happened after that. Let me know if you guys want a part 4. 4 about the worst night of my life. Just a little side note, I am in bed, so it's going to be a black screen. and you can probably hear my dog snoring. I'm just going to go from my point of view the rest of the time because I texted my sister, but I think she's sleeping. So pretty much I had to call my sister after my mom told her to go out the back door. And there was a Sheetz right across from where she was. But since she had to go out the back, she just saw like all woods and no gas station. So I got on the phone with her. She runs over to the gas station. And when we get back to my stepdad's house, we call our dad and let him know what happened. And the police actually got involved. And they had called my dad because my mom had called them and told him a bunch of stuff that just wasn't true. Like saying that my stepdad was a pedophile and stuff. Just like saying stuff that could actually ruin this man's life. And usually my stepdad would come pick us up and then drop us back off. But the police said that my dad had to come get us tomorrow morning, even though he had full custody and could decide who we could go with and stuff. So my dad came the next day and picked us up.
Story time about how my husband accidentally told me that he was cheating on me. So just some background information. My husband and I got engaged 2 years ago. And this whole situation happened a month after we got married. So fast forward, it's a Sunday morning. Well, usually every week on Sunday, I clean the whole house. So I woke up, went into the bathroom to take my ring off, and I could not get it off. Mind you, I had gained a little bit of weight since my husband and I got engaged. Anyways, I tried butter, I tried soap, I tried everything, even oil. So after trying to get it off for an hour straight, my finger was 3 times bigger than it usually is. So at this point, I'm really scared that I'm going to have to get it cut off. Because 1, I didn't want to ruin it. And 2, it was really expensive. So I call my husband and he's like, "Oh, call your dad. Firefighters always know what to do." So I called my dad and thank God he lived 5 minutes away because he drove over really quickly. Like for part 2. Part 2 of how my husband accidentally told me that he was cheating on me. So like I said, my dad lived 5 minutes away, so he just rushed over to my house. And we tried a few more things to get it off. We tried Windex, we tried the dental floss, none of it was working. So my dad told me that we were going to have to cut it off with pliers. So he comes over with the pliers, cuts the ring off. Well, a few days later, I had taken it to the same place that we got it to get the band fixed. Or replaced. While I was there, I decided to get it appraised, just for insurance reasons. So a few days later, I go and pick up my ring, and when I get home, I look at the appraisal. It was not the same one that I had picked out in the store. It looked exactly like it, but there was like a $20,000 price difference. So right now, I'm like, what the fuck? I'm not mad about the money part. I'm more mad that my husband lied to me. I was more upset about the fact that he had lied to me. So I had made dinner reservations for the next night, so that way I could hopefully bring up the conversation about it, like for part 3. Part 3 of how my husband accidentally told me that he was cheating on me. So like I said, I had made reservations for him and I to go out to dinner so that way I could hopefully spark up the conversation about it. So when we finally sat down, I had started up the conversation. I had told him that when I took my ring in to get it fixed, I also got it appraised. And his face immediately changed after that, but he wasn't saying anything. He was like, "Oh, okay, how did that go?" So at this point, I was tired of beating around the bush, and I was like, "Why wouldn't you just tell me if we were having money troubles?" And he was like, "What do you mean? We're not having any money troubles. I'm fine." One thing about my husband is that he is very wealthy, and he takes pride in the fact that he is very wealthy. So obviously, me right there kind of questioning his wealth, he fucked up and told me the truth. He was like, "Well, I'm going to be honest with you. I accidentally gave the ring that I was supposed to give you to a girl I was seeing at the time, and I just never got around to replacing yours." So fast forward to present day, I am currently moving all of my stuff out of our house and filing for divorce.
Story time about how I got fired because I told my boss that I loved him. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, instead I made Instagram. Around 2 months ago, I started a new job. It was a CrossFit gym, and all I had to do was check people in before class started. One of the female owners of the gym ended up hiring me, but I didn't realize that she had a husband. Let me tell you, when this man came to the gym, I nearly fell off my seat. Not only is he the owner of the gym, but he's also a model. Like a legit published model. Then I found out that he was married to the woman that hired me. Being the bad bitch that I am, I knew that that was not going to stop me. I have a not so little confession. I have dated about 3 married men in my past. I know it sounds like a lot, but married men are the best. They give you money, they take you out, and they keep it a secret. So there's just like no hassle when you date a married guy. So I came up with a plan. It was pretty much just to flirt with him, and let me tell you, he gave it right back to me. Girl, I am just as shocked as you are. I thought it was gonna be harder to get him to warm up, but nope. Slowly I realized that he started scheduling me on the days that he was there by himself. He was just giving me the vibe, like, you know the vibe. So I started waking up extra early to do my hair and my makeup and look absolutely fabulous when I got to work. Not only that, but I also started bringing him in food. I knew he loved protein smoothies, so I was taking him a protein smoothie almost weights every single day. And I would just happen to bring extra lunch with me, and I would offer it to him, and he loved it. This was the perfect excuse for us to sit down together and have lunch every single day. And then we got into him complaining about his dear wife. Now, let me be honest, I didn't know where things were gonna go with him, but I definitely wasn't expecting him to start complaining about his wife so soon. This is characteristic of a man that wants to cheat. A little backstory on the wife: she is a ball buster. She also kind of has a short temper, which kind of scares me. By the end of my second week there, I knew I had him in my pocket. But then he had to go away for a shoot, which meant that I wasn't gonna see him for 2 weeks. Part 2 is up. Story time about how I got fired for telling my boss that I loved him. Part 2. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I repeat, this is not my story time. That's when he went away for 2 weeks on a business trip, and I was so sad. And that's when I realized I was in love with him. Like, truly, madly, and deeply. And I only knew that because I wasn't flirting with anybody else. I was only thinking about him and waiting for him to come back. So during those 2 weeks, I took advantage and I started going to the gym every single day. I mean, I worked there, so I started working out like crazy. He happened to mention that he loves girls with abs, so I basically went on a 500-calorie deficit, and I was pretty skinny by the time he got back. I would not recommend this to anybody because it's absolutely treacherous. I love food, and I was always in a bad mood until he came back. The next time he saw me at the gym, I looked phenomenal. He walked up to me and said, "Oh my God, I missed you so much, and you look fucking amazing." I melted into a puddle. The following day, he and I both opened the gym together, and of course, I brought him his favorite smoothie, and he asked me if we could catch up. That's when he asked me if I had been dating anybody while he'd been gone. The fact that this man was already jealous after not seeing me for 2 weeks let me know that he was vibing me just as much as I was vibing him. So I did the logical thing and I said yes. He looked at me dead in the face and said, "Why are you gonna date somebody when you have me?" I was so shook, I actually didn't know what to say, and he laughed. Then he said, "Oh, you know, I'm just joking. I'm just messing with you." And I said, "No, you're not. You actually meant that, didn't you?" That's when we just both stared at each other without saying a single word. I actually thought he was gonna kiss me, but he didn't. Then he confessed that he was so attracted to me that he didn't know if I should stay working there. I told him that we could just simply stay away from each other so that I wouldn't have to quit. He said that that's not going to work for him because he actually wanted to see me and talk to me all the time. After that, I could tell that he was mustering up the courage to kiss me or to do something, but he was scared. Go to part 3. Story time about I confessed to my boss that I loved him and he fired me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I sent him on Instagram. After he confessed his feelings for me, I could tell that he was just trying to be close to me like all the time. He would find any excuse to touch my arm or my shoulder or my neck or my hair. And I was super flattered. By the way, I'm already in love with him at this point. All I was waiting for was for him to actually kiss me or to make the first move. Then I noticed some weird stuff happening between him and his wife. Do you remember that they both own the gym that I work at? Well, she started coming to the gym in the mornings when he was supposed to be there. So every time I would bring an extra protein smoothie and an extra lunch for him, I would have to hide it from her. That's when one day he asked me if we could meet up at an undisclosed location. It was pretty much just an empty parking lot, and I went into his car and then we talked. He confessed to me that he was having an affair with somebody else from the gym, and that this person was starting to go a little bit crazy because she saw him and I flirting. He told me that this woman was crazy and that she might even tell his wife about us. So basically he wanted me to not flirt with him anymore and that maybe we could see each other outside of work. But that even that would be too dangerous just in case she was following him. I asked him to tell me who it was and he gave me a hint. He said, "She's the really loud one." Immediately, I knew who he was talking about. It was one of the current gym members who comes to every single class with her husband. I could not make this stuff up. Then he basically told me straight out I needed to not speak to him at all at the gym, and that if this woman ever came up to me and asked me anything, I needed to just play dumb. To be honest, I actually got scared at this point because he told me that she was dangerous and crazy. So we both actually started acting like we didn't know each other. But the thing was, he wasn't trying to see me outside of work. He always kept saying that he was too busy or that his wife couldn't find out. So I wasn't talking to him at work at all. And again, this just solidified the fact that I was totally in love with this man. And then I found myself extremely jealous at the thought of him having an affair with this other woman. Not just that, but one day I walk into the office and he's full on making out with his wife on their desk. I felt totally betrayed and lied to. This whole time he's talking about how much he hated his wife, but then he's making out with her. And the woman that he was having an affair with was coming to the gym all the time and always grabbing on him and pulling him. I was jealous and envious all the time. It actually got to the point where I couldn't do my job because I was always aware of where he was and who he was talking to. Finally, we both show up to open the gym one day and we have some privacy. That's when I told him that I was really jealous and that all I wanted to do was be with him. And then the words just came out of my mouth. I said, "I love you." He looked horrified. He looked confused and angry. Then all he said was, "I have to fire you." Then he said that he couldn't have me around because I was too much of a risk. risk. I literally begged him not to fire me, but he said no. I even tried to take it back. The next day, he gave me a $3,000 check and told me never to come back. I drive by the gym every single day just to check up on him, and I'm still totally obsessed. My friends actually think I'm going crazy, but I'm just in love. Should I just forget about him or do I have hope? My girlfriend left me on my birthday to go be with her guy best friend. I, female 22, and my girlfriend 22. We both came out at the same time, and we were actually best friends before we came out. The reason why we both became best friends was because we both knew we were gay, but we didn't really tell anybody, but we knew each other was gay, if you know what I mean. We've been together for 6 months, and everything has been actually pretty good, with the exception of her guy best friend moving back to the city. When I met this guy, I knew right away that he has feelings for my girlfriend, especially when he gets drunk. He gets super handsy with her. Obviously, I told my girlfriend that I didn't like him around her at all, but she put her foot down and told me that I had no say in it because he was her best friend. I basically didn't bring it up again, but they would hang out all the time, and they were always together by themselves. They never invited me to go along with them. My birthday was coming up, and her and I had already booked a little cabin in the woods. We were very excited about this, but then she slowly started to ask me if I wouldn't mind if her best friend joined us, and I told her I didn't want him to be there. It was my birthday, and I was paying for the cabin. You see, my girlfriend's really broke, so I basically pay for everything. Then she threw a tantrum and said that I was being controlling and that I didn't want to let her have fun. Then she picks up the phone and calls her best friend to complain about me in front of me. Part 2 is up. My girlfriend abandoned me on my birthday so she could go hang out with her guy best friend. Part 2. After I told her I did not want her best friend coming to my birthday getaway, she threw a tantrum, called him, and complained about me in front of me to him. I was actually so hurt that I grabbed the phone and hung up. She looked at me and told me that I had no right to take the phone from her and blah, blah, blah. That's when I broke down into tears and asked her point blank, do you have a crush on this guy? Immediately, she said no. But then she told me she had a confession. She proceeded to tell me that they both lost each other's V cards to each other, and that's why they were so close. And that because they're trying to work on their relationship, I should let him come to my birthday trip, the one I'm paying for. I asked her if she had feelings for him once again, and she said no. And then I asked her if he has feelings for her. This girl just stayed quiet. Then she had the gall to say, what if he does? Is that really that bad? I actually had to explain to her why that would be a bad situation. Finally, my birthday comes around and she is nowhere to be seen. I was waiting for her in my car to drive to the cabin with her. An hour later, after she's supposed to be there, she sends me a text saying that she's gonna stay with him and that hopefully this distance will make our relationship stronger. Instead, I took my whole family to the cabin and now I'm ignoring her. Now she's been calling me nonstop. I took her not showing up as a breakup, but she wants me back. What should I do? Story time about how I asked my girlfriend to marry me 3 times and she said no. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I'm a 27-year-old male. My girlfriend is 33. We started dating 2 years ago. A couple of months in, we started talking about marriage and she sounded really open to it. My dream has always been to get married and have kids. I never thought I would fall in love this hard. I have dated girls before, but I have never put in this much effort. To tell you that I took her to meet my parents 2 weeks after I met her, and even after 2 years, I keep falling in love with her. I'm really close to my parents and I decided to tell them that I wanted to marry her. They told me to go for it. So I planned a very elaborate proposal. I even got her 2 best friends to help me. I hired a photographer, a videographer, and I got the type of ring that I knew she would love from Tiffany's. The day of the proposal, everything went perfect. She showed up looking absolutely beautiful. Her friends were hiding behind a bush, and the photographer and the videographer got everything just at the right time. But guess what the problem was? She said no. She told me that she definitely didn't think we were ready for marriage or even to be engaged. This is a fundamental flaw. I don't agree with her. So 2 weeks later, I proposed again. And guess what she said? Part 2 is up. Story time about how I asked my girlfriend to marry me 3 times and she said no. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. So after she said no the first time, I decided to ask a second time. And this time she told me that she just wasn't convinced that I was the guy she wanted to marry. As you can imagine, this broke my heart. And I gotta tell you, I'm not a bad looking guy. I get hit on regularly by women, and all of the girlfriends I've had in my life that are just friends have told me that they would want to be in a relationship with a guy like me. I'm caring, kind, considerate, I'm funny. So for my girlfriend of 2 years to tell me that she wasn't convinced I was the guy for her broke me to my core. I even started questioning my manliness. Would I be a good provider? Would I be a good father? Do I even deserve these things? My girlfriend has been the only girl that has never chased me. I'm always the one getting chased by girls, and truthfully, it bores me. So maybe the fact that she's not chasing me is what keeps me interested in her, which I know is so messed up, because maybe if she did say yes to marrying me, would I get bored of her? I asked her to marry me a 3rd time, and she said no again. My friends and family think I should break up with her, but I love her too much. I can't get enough of this girl. I want her to marry me. What should I do? Story time about how I asked my girlfriend to marry me 3 times and she said no. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. So after she said no the first time, I decided to ask a second time. And this time she told me that she just wasn't convinced that I was the guy she wanted to marry. As you can imagine, this broke my heart. And I gotta tell you, I'm not a bad looking guy. I get hit on regularly by women, and all of the girlfriends I've had in my life that are just friends have told me that they would want to be in a relationship with a guy like me. I'm caring, kind, considerate, I'm funny. So for my girlfriend of 2 years to tell me that she wasn't convinced I was the guy for her broke broke me to my core. I even started questioning my manliness. Would I be a good provider? Would I be a good father? Do I even deserve these things? My girlfriend has been the only girl that has never chased me. I'm always the one getting chased by girls, and truthfully, it bores me. So maybe the fact that she's not chasing me is what keeps me interested in her, which I know is so messed up, because maybe if she did say yes to marrying me, would I get bored of her? I asked her to marry me a third time, and she said no again. My friends and family think I should break up with her, but I love her too much. I can't get enough of this girl. I want her to marry me. What should I do?
My boyfriend confessed that he thinks I'm ugly. Here is the long requested update. Disclaimer, this is not my story time.
After he told me that he would not marry me because he didn't consider me as pretty as I should be, I started asking him what he would change about me. Can you believe he sat down on his phone and made a list? An actual damn list. First on his list was, I was too heavy. He told me I needed to lose at least 20 pounds. I figured that shouldn't be too hard, so I got on a diet. Then he told me he preferred my natural hair color, which is brown. So I stopped dyeing my hair blonde and went completely brown. Oh yes, and his last request was that I get lip filler. He said that my thin lips have always bothered him. Then he told me I should look at more makeup tutorials to figure out how to do my makeup. Then he told me that I should tan in the sun to get some nice color on me. I know you guys want me to break up with him. What if I make all these changes and I'm actually healthier and happier? Not just for him, but for me. Since I last spoke to you guys, it's been about 2 weeks. I've only lost 2 pounds, but I'm on my way. I ended up getting lip filler and I love it. My lips look pretty but not exaggerated, so it actually looks nice. I also got Botox and cheek filler even though he did not request this. And to be honest, my face looks a lot better. It actually does like my new hair though. And I started sitting out in the sun, although I will start fake tanning because I do not want to get wrinkles. Mostly because self-care sister told me not to, and I trust this girl. Since making all these changes, he's actually been a little bit nicer to me. In exchange for me making all these changes, he's spending more time with me and going out less with his friends. He's even taking me out on dates twice a week. Before I started making all these changes, I was always trying to look like something I wasn't. I was obsessed with being blonde and contouring, and he basically begged me not to contour anymore. So I asked Esther to do a tutorial for me, which she said she's gonna post. I feel like all he really wants me to do is focus on my self-care, and I'm totally willing to do that. I'll have to keep you guys updated, but so far so good. I did get myself a trainer, and he actually got jealous, which I think is a good sign, right? Self-care sister out.
Story time about how my creepy uncle flirts with me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I sent me on Instagram. I come from a really big family. My mom has 5 sisters and 1 brother, and my dad has 4 brothers and sisters. All of them have their own kids, so I have a lot of cousins. And this means we have a lot of family get-togethers. Every single weekend, someone is hosting a party. We all get together and eat, and it's actually a really nice time. But there's always that one creepy uncle. In my case, it's my mom's brother. He's 46-year-old and has never married, but he's a bachelor. He's got money, so he basically has a bunch of sugar babies. Whenever my family tells him that he needs to get married, he says he'll never get married to anybody. He thinks women only exist for the pleasure of men. When I turned 16, I noticed that he would stare at me a lot. At first, it was just staring. Every now and again, he never did anything really creepy then, but just the staring was enough for me. I never told my mom about it then, not until I turned 18. This is when he started making comments like, wow, you're growing into your body, or wow, you got great hips. He would make comments about how I was growing up, like, ew. He even told my dad that he needed to keep me away from guys because I was growing up really quickly. And because of my curves, men would think that I was a woman. This is when I finally told my mom that he was making me super uncomfortable. She thought it was funny at first, so I avoided him at all costs. Part 2. Story time about how my creepy uncle flirts with me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It's me on Instagram. When I told my mom that he was making me super uncomfortable, she laughed it off. She thought it was funny. She said, oh, you know how he is. So from that point on, I basically avoided my uncle every time we were at a family event. When I turned 20, this is when things got even worse. He would ask me things like if I was a virgin, or if I had a boyfriend, if I had ever been on dates, and one time he even told me that he would get very jealous if I ended up bringing a guy to one of our family events. One time he complimented me on the dress that I was wearing, so after that, I only wore baggy clothes to family events. The fact that I had to change the way that I dressed so that he could control himself makes me sick. I finally told my mom again that my uncle was always bothering me. That's when she told me that the world is filled with men like him, and that all I needed to do was just ignore him. So I told my dad everything. My dad took it a little more seriously and told my uncle that he needed to stop making comments. My uncle just laughed. Part 3 is up. Story time about how my creepy uncle flirts with me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It's me on Instagram. I finally told my dad, and he told my uncle to stop making comments. My uncle just laughed and told my dad that he was overreacting, and that all he said to me was that I was a pretty girl. What a liar. In part 1 and 2, I told you guys that it was getting worse, but here's where it actually gets even worse. Like I said, I have a really big family, so my cousins are growing up too. One of them just turned 13, and my uncle cannot stop staring at her. She's maturing a lot quicker than most 13-year-olds. He's already staring at her. So here's what I did. At the next family event, I sat right next to him. Every time he would stare at one of my cousins or try to make a comment at me, I called him out for it in front of everybody. I even recorded the things that he said. The fact that I even have to do this at a family event makes me sick. Instead of enjoying my time with my family, I have to sit next to my creepy uncle policing him. Anyway, it's totally worth it though. I'm making sure that my cousins don't feel uncomfortable. After I had enough recordings of him saying nasty things, at the next family event, I showed it to my grandma. I basically played it for the entire family. My grandma told him that he couldn't come to any more events if he was going to behave that way. And of course, he apologized to everyone right away. But not to me, he apologized to my dad. After his half-ass apology, he was let back into family events. I don't think that's enough punishment. Give me some ideas because I think I deserve justice. Creepy uncle.
Story time about I caught my dad doing it with my neighbor. That's when my neighbor asked my dad for his number. I turned to her and I said, he's married to my mother, you know. And then I pushed my dad into the elevator. I instantly started to cry. I was embarrassed and mortified. How can I have a father like that? I told him he was never to come to my building again and that he flirted with her first. He was twice her age. Disgusting. He told me that I was overreacting and that the only person that made it weird and gross was me. Luckily, it did not take us long to move in all my boxes. But then he kept looking for excuses to stay. I asked him to leave 3 times. And all of a sudden, the girl walks out of the apartment that was right in front of me, meaning she's my neighbor. My dad started talking to her again. That's when I closed my apartment door and locked him out. Could hear them talking for a few minutes, so I put on my music and started unpacking. And then I called my mom immediately to tell her. And I begged her to come live with me. Then she told me that she got into a really big fight with my dad about it. I was so angry I opened my door and just left. I see my dad and her still talking in the hallway. I didn't say anything and I left. Went to pick up my mom and I took her out for lunch. My mom and I decided to go back to my apartment to unpack. I walked up to my apartment first. And as soon as I opened the door, that's when I see my dad's naked butt on top of my neighbor. Part 3 is up. Story time about how I caught my dad doing the dirty with my neighbor. My lying, cheating father helped me move into my new apartment. I have to be honest and say my dad is narcissistic. He's always been selfish, thinks he's always right. There's just no way to reason with him when he's wrong. My sister and I are very tight with my mom. We will always side with her. By the way, my parents are still married. They've been together for 37 years. My sister's 30 and I'm 22. I recently landed my dream job, and this meant that I needed to find an apartment closer to my job. So I moved about half an hour away from my parents. My dad travels for work a lot, which is the best. It means he's not home a lot. So I told my mom that she should move into my apartment with me. She said that she would think about it. My move-in day finally arrived. My mom and my sister had helped me pack and organize everything. My dad didn't lift a finger, so I asked him to help me move all the boxes into my apartment. He said yes. The moment we get into my apartment, he sees a really pretty girl. And he just starts talking to her like I'm not even there. For some reason, this girl starts flirting back. I was appalled and disgusted. She then asked my dad for his phone number. What the heck? Part 2 is story time about I caught my dad doing the dirty with my neighbor. As soon as I see my dad's naked butt on top of my neighbor, I just started yelling. I needed them to know that I was in the room. How dare my dad do this in my apartment? I mean, couldn't he go to her apartment? 20 steps behind me was my mom. And as soon as I yell, she runs in. Mind you, my dad is still on top of this girl. When he sees my mom, he jumps up. The girl is completely naked, grabs her clothes, and runs over to her apartment. My dad didn't even bother to cover his dingling. It was the most horrendous thing that had ever happened to me. That's when my mom says, I want a divorce and I'm moving in with her. He didn't say a word. He calmly put his clothes back on and walked out. Didn't give an explanation, didn't apologize, nothing. A true narcissist. When he finally leaves, my mom and I start to cry. We called my sister and she came over. We went back to my parents' house and grabbed all of my mom's stuff. We didn't even have time for boxes, we just grabbed trash bags. My mom and I are living together, but guess what? My dad is now dating my neighbor. He's never apologized to my mom. They did get a divorce, thank God. We have to see him all the time at her apartment. How do I break them up? My boyfriend is moving in with his girl best friend and I don't trust her one bit. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it's sending me on Instagram. My boyfriend and I have been together for almost a year. When I met him, he already had a very big group of best friends. One of them was this girl. There's actually another girl in the group, but my boyfriend and this particular girl, let's call her Lacey. Lacey is completely obsessed with my boyfriend. I tell him all the time, but he doesn't want to listen to me. She goes out of her way to spend time with him, and she'll do girlfriend things for him. Sometimes she'll call him and say, I cooked us dinner, come over to my apartment. She even goes to his apartment and helps him do laundry. Let me go back though. When we started dating, he asked me not to be uncomfortable and that him and her were only good friends. But as soon as I saw them with each other, it was visible that she was in love with him. When he first brought me around to meet his friends, she was super territorial. She would sit next to him and even sat on his lap in front of me. And this made my boyfriend uncomfortable. He asked her to sit on a chair instead of his lap. After that, I asked him if he had feelings for her and he said no. He said he's only ever seen her as a sister, that the thought of hooking up with her makes him want to vomit. Lacey reached out to me and asked me to have lunch with her. Throughout the whole lunch, all she talked about was my boyfriend, and how amazing he is, and how only a good girl deserves him. Part 2 is up. My boyfriend is moving in with his girl best friend and I don't trust her. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I was sending me on Instagram. And her and I went to lunch. All she talked about was my boyfriend. That's when she started saying things like, he only deserves a really good girl. That's when I was straight up with her. I told her that he had already chosen me because he loved me and that I didn't need her to tell me what my boyfriend needed. You guys should have seen the look on this girl's face. She was shocked that I would defend myself and even talk back to her. Then she said, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to make you feel bad. I told her that I didn't feel bad and that I knew what she was doing. She was basically trying to intimidate me and make me feel that I wasn't good enough for my boyfriend. She denied it and started apologizing. But at least I made it clear to her that I was not stupid and that she was not going to walk all over me like she probably did with all of his exes. By the way, one of his past girlfriends actually broke up with her because of this girl. I mean, Lacey. Found this out through one of the other friends. They told me that I needed to be careful with her. That's why I was prepared to go to lunch with her. Guess what happened though? I called my boyfriend to say hi to him and that's when he starts yelling at me. He said Lacey called him to tell him that I had attacked her at lunch. That I basically threatened her. I explained to him what happened from my point of view and he said that she was probably just overreacting. But it was her word against mine. Part 3 is up. My boyfriend is moving in with his girl best friend and I do not trust her. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It's sent me on Instagram. After Lacey told my boyfriend that I had attacked her and threatened her, he told me to keep my distance. So I did. But that meant that he would hang out with her without me. I found this completely unacceptable. That's when I told my boyfriend that she was manipulative, that she had clearly planned everything out so that he and her could be alone. Then I told him that his ex-girlfriend left him because of her. He told me that I didn't know the full story and that I should mind my own business. That's when I noticed that he wouldn't come over to my apartment every day. And guess why? His best friend Lacey told him that she had a stalker and that she needed my boyfriend to stay over her house so that she could feel protected and safe. I just can't. I told him that she was clearly manipulating him and probably lying about the stalker situation so that he could spend more time with her. And just like that, 2 days later, he told me that they were moving in together and that she miraculously found an apartment big enough for the two of them. In 2 days? I don't think so. I think she had been planning this the whole time. And my boyfriend is just stupid enough to fall for it. I told him if he moved in with her that he should just forget about me. He begged me not to leave him, so I guess I'm still his girlfriend. He's still debating whether or not to move in with her. He says he doesn't want to lose me, but he wants to be able to be there for her. I think I should break up with him, but maybe there's another solution. What do you guys think I should do? Story time about how my best friend walks around naked in front of my boyfriend. Disclaimer, is not my story time. It's sending me on Instagram. The bitch that used to be my best friend, yeah, she's the worst person in the entire world. By the time I met her, my boyfriend and I had already been going out for 6 months. I met her through some friends and her and I got along really well. She was wild and crazy and she brought that wild and crazy side out of me. And at the time it was something that I did need, but I didn't realize just how wild she was. Let me tell you what this girl was like. She was the type of girl that would try to bring up sex in every conversation. Like no matter who we were talking to, she would always bring up sex. She would always try to impress everyone about how much she knew about it and how much she needed sex all the time. And sometimes I would ask her to not talk about it so much, and her response to that was, "Stop being such a prudy, bitch." My boyfriend and I decided to have all our friends over at my apartment for dinner. Since I had just met her, I decided to invite her over. This was the first time she was meeting my boyfriend and all of my friends. And of course, she proceeded to monopolize the entire conversation all night, and all she talked about was sex. Then she went to the bathroom and took off her jacket. She came out in her bra and shorts. Part 2 is story time about how my best friend walks around naked in front of my boyfriend. Disclaimer, is not my story time. It's sending me on Instagram. That's when she came out of the bathroom in her bra and a pair of shorts. Mind you, we have a bunch of our friends over having dinner at my place. I get up from the table and I ask her what's up. That's when she says that it's way too hot in my apartment and that I needed to turn down the temperature. I told her I'd give her a t-shirt if she wanted to and she said no. I'm comfortable in my body and I don't care if people look at me. When I look around, I see everyone staring at her. Obviously, all the guys are like oogling her goodies, but all the girls that are there with their guys are instantly upset. That's when my boyfriend bursts out laughing and says, "What's wrong with her?" She just starts laughing maniacally at what my boyfriend said. Then she goes and sits down next to my boyfriend and starts joking with him. You might be thinking I'm so stupid for this, but I decided to let it go. Oh yeah, she's also the type of person that never wants to go home. That's when I had to be honest with her and I told her that she was making everyone uncomfortable. And I asked her to leave, which she did. A few days later, she comes over to my place so that we can get ready to go out. My boyfriend was gonna go out with his friends and I was gonna go out with her. 2 seconds after she comes into my apartment, she walks out of the bathroom completely naked. And my boyfriend's just sitting there on the couch watching her. Part 3 is up. Story time about how my best friend walks around naked in front of my boyfriend. Disclaimer, is not my story time. It's sending me on Instagram. That's when she comes out completely naked. You could see everything. Boobs, butt, and V. And my boyfriend is sitting on the couch. As she comes out of the bathroom, his jaw drops to the floor. Then she says to me, "Oh my god, I couldn't find a towel, sorry." She walks straight into the guest bedroom where she has her clothes. My boyfriend and I look at each other and I'm completely disgusted. He, on the other hand, thought it was hilarious, so he starts laughing. Then she comes out of the guest bedroom in panties and a bra. I mean, I guess at least she wasn't naked this time. That's when I tell her, do you need help getting dressed or something? She says, oh no girl, I'm just thirsty. I'm gonna get something to drink. So I said to her, I'll get you something to drink. You can go get dressed. At this point, I had it. But guess what? This wasn't the last time. A few weeks later, I wanted to go to her place to get ready this time. But then she insisted on coming over to mine instead. That's when I got the feeling that she had done all of that to get my boyfriend's attention. And I straight up told her, are you just walking around naked at my place just because you want my boyfriend to see you? Of course she denied it. She says he's cute, but he's not that cute. What? Part 4 is up. Story time about how my best friend walks around naked in front of my boyfriend. Disclaimer is not my story time, it's that I'm on Instagram. At this point, she had been naked in front of my boyfriend twice, but it wasn't the last time. She came over to pick me up one time and I told her to wait for me downstairs. Well, instead of waiting for me downstairs, she decided to come up to my apartment. While I was in the bedroom changing, my boyfriend let her in. That's when she comes straight into my bedroom without even knocking and says, hey girl, do you have a dress I can wear? The dress she was wearing was absolutely perfect. I asked her why and she said that she didn't feel sexy enough. Without even me saying yes, she started raiding my closet. Then she pulls out a very expensive dress I had not even put on yet. My boyfriend was standing in the doorway just watching the whole thing go down. I look at my boyfriend and he just rolls his eyes at me. Then out of nowhere, she takes off her dress and she's completely naked underneath. He looks at my boyfriend and says, oh, sorry, I didn't see there. My boyfriend turned around and walked away. I finally closed the door and confronted her about it. She told me that I'm a prude and that I needed to relax. I kicked her out and we haven't spoken since. She's been begging to talk to me and hang out. My boyfriend told me that if I felt uncomfortable around her, then for her not to come over. But he says that he's fine with her. His reaction also upset me too. What should I do? My boyfriend confessed to me that he's attracted to my best friend. Should I leave him? Disclaimer is not my story time. Send me on Instagram. I know you guys are gonna all say yes immediately, but hear me out. My boyfriend and I have been dating for 6 months. My best friend and I actually met him at a bar. That night, I never expected that he would ever come after me. I consider my best friend the prettier of the two of us, so I'm used to her getting hit on instead of me. But that night, my boyfriend came to me. He talked to me pretty much the entire night, and my best friend told me to go for it. So I did. He and I spent the night together, and after that, we were inseparable. To the point where he wanted me to move in with him after 2 months. My parents thought I was absolutely crazy and they didn't want me to move in with him, but I did anyway. I come from a Latino family, so this was absolutely reprehensible. I went against my family's wishes and they actually stopped speaking to me for a little bit, but luckily I got them back. My boyfriend during that time gave me all his support. He told me that my family would come around eventually and that they would see that we were in love. So living together was a logical next step. After 3 months of living together, I knew that I wanted to marry him, and he would talk about marriage all the time. He asked me what kind of ring I would want and what I would want for the proposal. We even started talking about our honeymoon. I was also starting to get in the best shape of my life. I was looking super snatched. My boyfriend told me that he loved the way that I look, but that he didn't want me to get skinny. Again, I just felt like he was supporting me and loving me. Around this time, my best friend started dating somebody. After a few weeks, they got really serious about the relationship. And of course, we went on double dates. After the third double date, I noticed that my boyfriend was getting a little annoyed. I got the feeling he was jealous of my best friend's boyfriend. Follow for part 2. My boyfriend confessed to me that he's attracted to my best friend. Should I leave him? Disclaimer is not my story time. Send me on Instagram. I asked him if he was jealous of my best friend's boyfriend, and that's when he said no. But every time we would go on double dates, he would get in such a bad mood. 3 weeks ago, my best friend told me that she was moving in with her boyfriend. And when I told my boyfriend that they were moving in, his face almost went green. I asked him what was wrong and he said nothing. After that, he went into the bathroom and didn't come out for 40 minutes. Again, I asked him if he was okay and he said yeah. And I sat him down and asked him to be honest with me. That's when he said, I'm attracted to your best friend. Instantly started to cry because I had already been suspecting it. He explained to me that he didn't have any feelings for her until she got a boyfriend, and that he felt that he had some sort of ownership over her. Before my best friend got a boyfriend, the 3 of us would hang out a lot. And not once then did I ever get a feeling that he was attracted to her. He told me that he would never act on his feelings, but he didn't want to go on any more double dates. I asked him if he wanted to be with her instead of me, and he said absolutely not. He said that I was the love of his life and that attraction only meant attraction, that he didn't have feelings for her. A few days later, he took me to the most expensive restaurant in our city and asked me to marry him. But I didn't know what to say. I can't stop thinking that he's attracted to my best friend. Part 3 is up. My boyfriend confessed to me that he's attracted to my best friend. What should I do? Disclaimer is not my story time. Sending me on Instagram. After he proposed, I told him I didn't know what to say. He told me to think it over. I finally decided to tell my best friend what my boyfriend had told me. That he had confessed that he was attracted to her. First she laughed. I told her no. I'm serious. He confessed that he's attracted to you. That's when she told me I needed to break up with him. That's when I told her that he had also proposed. And she said, well then you really need to break up with him now. That's when she told me that she didn't want me to resent her and that it was completely out of her control. And I didn't. I promised her that I would never resent her for my boyfriend being attracted to her. It's not like she ever did anything on purpose to make him feel attracted. She also told me that marrying him right now would be rushing into it. And she's kind of right. We've only really known each other for 6 months. Then she told me that she's never gotten the feeling that he's attracted to her. She's never caught him looking at her or anything like that. So now her theory is that he's looking for an easy way out and that he probably wants me to break up with him. But my boyfriend is still sweet and super affectionate. He's constantly showering me with love. My best friend thinks that if I stay with him, our relationship will suffer. I've known my best friend longer. What should I do? Story time about how my fiance is refusing to help me plan our wedding. Should I leave him? Disclaimer is not my story time. Send me on Instagram. So sad about the palette. My fiance and I met a few years ago through friends. When we first met each other, I had a really bad first impression of him. First off, he was completely up himself. All he did was talk about himself and never once asked me questions. We were surrounded by other people, so I gave him the benefit of the doubt when he asked me out. I said yes, but our first date was kind of the same. He only really talked about himself, his career, the things he likes to do, his favorite foods, his family, his dog. I eventually just started volunteering information because he wouldn't really ask me. After our date, I didn't speak to him for a full 2 weeks. I was really turned off by his attitude, but then he messaged me saying that he was really nervous and that he realizes that he probably could have been a little more talkative. I said, yeah, you could have been. I told him how I really felt and he did apologize and he asked me out to dinner again. This time I invited him to my apartment and he made us a full 4-course meal. By the way, he's a chef. Obviously, that night, I completely fell in love with him. He made all of my favorite foods, but the gourmet version. A few months later, we became boyfriend and girlfriend. And there were still a few things that I didn't like about him, though. Like, he never really had anything to talk about other than himself. Exactly a year after we met, he decided to propose, and I said yes. But when I asked him to do things for the wedding, he says no. Part 2 is up. Story time about how my fiance is refusing to help me plan our wedding. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I said I'm on Instagram. To be honest, when he asked me to marry him, I was totally blindsided. Honestly, felt like our relationship was starting to get stale. So when he asked me to marry him, I was like, for real? He told me that I was the first person who ever made him feel important. And looking back, I realized that it's because he only talked about himself and I really let him talk about only himself. Anyway, I immediately said yes out of the excitement. But when I called my mom to tell her, I was actually crying, which is like, okay, maybe I shouldn't marry him then. A few weeks into our engagement, we hadn't talked about planning at all. So I decided to ask him, like, what do you want the wedding to be like? That's when he told me that he didn't really care, but that he would just give me money for it. I mean, on one hand, that makes me really happy because I don't want my parents to have to pay for the wedding, and he has a lot of money. But on the other hand, I want him to be involved, especially for the food because he's a chef. I decided to hire a wedding planner because my job is extremely busy. I work in marketing. Asked him to go to a few meetings with me. He said no. When I finally found the perfect wedding planner, I asked my fiance if we could go have lunch with him, and he said no. This is when I blew up in his face. I asked him why he wasn't participating at all. That's when he told me that he was too busy at the restaurant, that he didn't have time to do anything with the wedding. I was like, okay, fine. When it came time to choosing the caterers, I demanded that he go with me. He told me that he would try to get off work, but he never did. Every time I tried to schedule it, he would say that he was busy with work. That's when I told him that his restaurant, which is super fancy, should just cater the whole wedding. And he said no. He told me they were way too busy and ready to get a Michelin star, so there was absolutely no way they could cater his wedding. That's when he said, you can handle it, I trust you. I went home and cried the entire night. Part 3 is up. Story time about how my fiance refuses to help me plan our wedding. Claimers to know my story time. I sent him on Instagram. After I got home and cried, he came home and asked me what was wrong. That's when I told him that he didn't seem excited about the wedding, and that leaving all the planning to me made me feel like I was his employee, as if I had nothing better to do, which I do have my career just like he has his. Not to mention the fact that me picking everything I want for our wedding makes it feel like it's my wedding and not ours. He told me that I was overreacting. He also said that he was excited for the wedding, but that he was too tired and too busy to even think about it. That's when I told him that I was really busy and I was really tired too. And he begrudgingly told me that he would carve out some time this week so that we could speak to some of the caterers. I told the wedding planner and he started setting up some meetings. But of course, my fiance canceled on the first 2. He did show up to the 3rd one, but all he did was criticize the food. Then we went cake tasting. I expected this to be fun. When my friends have had cake tastings for their wedding, they always have so much fun. As soon as we showed up to the cake shop, he asked me, where did you find this? That's when I told him that our planner had found it. He said it looked like a supermarket bakery. That's when I told him that I don't mind supermarket bakeries and that it was probably just as good as a French bakery. He laughed and said, wow, you're funny, babe. We tasted the cakes and he actually liked them. Thank God. But then he requested to go to more cake tastings. We ended up going to 5 other places. This was already too much for me. I got a new account at work and I'm still trying to lose weight for the wedding. So him making me run around trying to taste cake is like the straw that broke the camel's back. After 2 weeks, we finally decided on a cake flavor. Most people must have fun planning their weddings, right? But I just feel like I'm drowning. I have to make all the important decisions on my own. I decided to involve my mom and sister and they've helped me so much. Of course, the wedding planner is helping me too, but ultimately the decisions have to be made by me. He hasn't made any effort to help me with anything else. I kind of want to break up with him, but I feel like this isn't a big enough reason to break up with him. What should I do? My husband signed up for my sister's OnlyFriends. Should I divorce him? Disclaimer, not my story time. Instead of me on Instagram. My husband and I have a really toxic relationship. When he and I first started dating, I was extremely jealous. I would instigate fights almost every single day. Now that we're married, I'm definitely less jealous, but he's always been jealous throughout our relationship. He tries to control everything I do, down to the way I dress and even the people I can or cannot hang out with. He even insisted that I quit my job, which I did. He's invested a lot in Tesla and crypto, so he makes a lot of money without having to leave the house, which yes, is totally amazing, but that means he and I are together all the time. And with his jealousy, sometimes I just can't stand him. I've tried to help him with his jealousy because I used to be in that place. And when I try to talk to him about it, he just gets mad at me. Whenever he sees that I post something on Instagram, he gets angry. He says that I'm looking for attention, which of course I am, but not from guys. Everyone posts on social media because they want to show off their life. A little on my sister. We're identical twins, and we're really, really close. Unfortunately, my sister got laid off from her job last year. That's when she decided to start her OnlyFriends. I support her in everything she wants to do. She's actually making really good money from it, so she's really happy about it. A few days ago, I got on my husband's phone to look for something. When I see my sister's pictures, part 2 is up. My husband signed up for my sister's OnlyFriends. Should I divorce him? Disclaimers are not my story time. It's on Instagram. A few days ago, I got on my husband's phone to transfer some money from his account to mine. When I started looking for his banking app, I noticed something else on his screen. I had never seen this before, so I clicked on it. And as soon as I opened it, I see my sister's pictures. And I knew it was her OnlyFriends right away. By the way, I had never told my husband that my sister had an OnlyFriends. She wouldn't even post about it on her social media. So the fact that he found it makes me believe that he had my phone bugged or something. But here's the thing. He was using a different name for his account. So it was likely that my sister did not know it was him. From there, I could see that he was following a bunch of other girls. And when I went to their messages, he had paid over hundreds of dollars every single day to all of these girls. Can you imagine how much money that is? My husband came into the room and saw me on his phone. Of course, he didn't freak out because he never thought that I would find it. But I confronted him right away. But he didn't even flinch. He said he had every right to go on OnlyFans because it was the same thing as going to any website. I told him to at least unfollow my sister and he said that he wouldn't. He said he loved it because it was like watching me do naughty things. Then he said, "Isn't this better than cheating on you?" I was flabbergasted. Part 3 is up. My husband signed up for my sister's OnlyFriends. Should I divorce him? Disclaimers is not my story time. It's on Instagram. That's when he told me that it was better than him cheating on me. And I was shocked. I couldn't think of anything else to say, so I threatened him. I told him that if he didn't stop following my sister, that I would start my own OnlyFriends account. Like I said, he's really jealous. So he went berserk. He ripped my phone out of my hand and threw it against the wall. Then he told me that the only reason he asked me to quit my job was so that I wouldn't be around other men. By the way, I used to be a personal trainer, and most of the time I would only train women. I told him that my sister and I wouldn't be comfortable with him looking at our OnlyFriends. It was so disturbing. Oh, and I also told him that he needed to stop controlling me, and that I could buy my own phone with my own money and start my own account. Then he came to his senses and started to apologize. And I also told him that I was suspecting that he bugged my phone, and that he was receiving my messages, because there was no other way he could have found out about my sister's account. Then he calmed down and explained things to me. He said that he had bugged my phone a few months ago because I was posting too much on Instagram and it was bothering him. So basically, he has access to my DMs and all my text messages. Promised to stop doing that and that he would buy me a new phone. And that's how he found out about my sister's OnlyFriends. He said he only signed up out of curiosity and that he only wanted to see a few pictures and then delete it. But the more he kept looking at her pictures, the more he would think of me and that it turned him on. And in front of me, he deactivated his account and deleted everything. He promised me that he would never do that again. Of course, I haven't forgiven him though. Haven't even spoken to him in days. But every time he sees me, he tries to kiss me and hug me. And when I push him away, he tries even harder. Honestly, I think he likes it. I do believe that he's secretly addicted to drama and that he thrives on it. I'm planning on never telling my sister about it. I don't think she'd feel comfortable around him ever again. I mean, I don't feel comfortable around him right now. I'm so confused and I don't know if I should leave him or not. He's so controlling all the time. What should I do?
Extremely toxic best friend story time. So when I was in 8th grade, there was this boy. And this boy would go around telling almost every girl that he liked her. And I was one of those girls. And he would do stuff with all of us. And there were like 11 of us. So we all hated each other. Especially this one girl, and we're gonna call her Abby. And every time we saw each other, we would be super mean to each other. Well, a year passed, we stopped talking to this kid. And I bumped into her at homecoming and basically apologized. So after that, we became best friends. And everything was good until every time I told her about a guy, she would start talking to them. Like this one boy that I was Snapchatting and talking to, she accidentally sent nudes to him and said, "Oh, sorry, I meant to send them to my boyfriend." So then she called one of my other best friends and said, "No, it actually wasn't an accident." And of course he told me because he was my best friend. So I was like, whatever, and stopped talking to the boy. And she did it again, like for part 2.
Extremely toxic best friend part 2. So pretty much her excuse for that was, oh, well, he said that he was gonna leak my nudes if I didn't send him them again. Which was a lie because literally half the school already had her nudes. So then I started talking to this other boy, and he lived like right down the street from her. So she was like, if you want to go to his house, you can. And I was like, are you sure? And she said, yeah, just go tell my mom. And I was like, oh, okay. So I went and told her mom where I was going and went over his house. So I walked back to her house and she literally locked me out. Like her mom had to come open the door for me to let me in. And she was like, oh, it's a good thing you came back when you did, because I was going to drive you home now and tell your dad everything that you did.
And she goes, I don't think you guys should be together because you're unexperienced. And she would always tell me how he flirts with her all the time. So after our friendship ended, she goes, I just felt like it was always a competition between me and you. Story time about my toxic ex-boyfriend that I met in therapy. Little background information. I was a part of this therapy group where you would go every week and talk about your feelings. Well, I saw this really cute kid, so I wrote down my Snapchat and gave it to him. He added me back, and then we started dating like a week later. And for the first 2 or 3 months, everything was going smooth. And then he became really toxic and controlling. Like, he would always go through my phone. And any guy that I had a streak with, he would accuse me of cheating on him with them. And it got to the point where he was literally so clingy. Like, every second of every day he wanted to FaceTime, he had to be talking to me. I had to have my location on. And I would explain to him that I needed my space, but he literally just did not get the hint. So by this point, we were literally on and off all the time. And anytime that I broke up with him, I would block him because I didn't want to think about him. But he started calling my parents and complaining about me, so they blocked him. And then he tried being friends with my brother to get to me.
Crazy story time about how my sister and I found out that we were hooking up with the same guy. So I was a freshman, my sister was a sophomore, and there was this really cute guy in her grade that I liked. But I could never find a way to talk to him because we weren't in the same grade and had none of the same classes. And my sister and I were not close at all. Like, we didn't tell each other shit, we didn't really talk to each other or anything. So by that being said, we never told each other about the boys that we liked. We just didn't have that bond. Well, track season came around. So they called all the people down who wanted to do track, and I saw him walk past my classroom window, so I decided to go too. So I signed up for track, and him and I started to talk a little bit. We exchanged numbers, and he was popular, I wasn't, so he didn't want to be seen with me. So after attendance, we would go to this graveyard right by the track and hook up. Well, the next day we had a meet in our school. So him and I went to the graveyard, hooked up, and that's when it started getting crazy, like for part 2.
Part 2. So on our way back from doing our thing, we had saw a group of kids that were behind this bush and they were chiefing. And we didn't think that they saw us because we were like, oh, they're just smoking, like whatever. So I go back to the meet, everything is good until the end of the meet. One of my best friends sends me this picture that I guess somebody posted on their story. And it was a picture of me and the kid hooking up. And next thing I know, my sister is blowing up my phone. And like I said, my sister and I didn't have a good bond, so I didn't give a shit what she had to say because I didn't know. So then I got home. And as soon as I walked into my room, my sister was literally waiting there for me. And she's like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like, him and I are in a relationship. And I'm like, bitch, what the fuck? And she was like, well, it's on the down low, but we're in a relationship. What the fuck is wrong with you? You're a whore. So then she decides to drive both of us over to his house. So we all decided to just stay away from each other. But then they got back together. So I just figured that wasn't fair, and I'm still hooking up with him while they're together. Crazy story time about how I found my aunt and my boyfriend hooking up at a family function. So every year my mom and stepdad would have a Christmas party and everyone from both sides of the family would come. And I also invited my boyfriend. And at this time, my boyfriend and I were both juniors in high school. So everybody came to the party and everything was going good. Well, like an hour into the party, all the adults were super drunk. So before we all opened gifts, I decided to help my mom clean up dinner. So while I'm washing the dishes, I look over and my aunt and boyfriend are talking a lot. And she started to get really touchy with him, but I didn't think anything of it because she was super drunk. So after I'm done cleaning up, we all start opening gifts. And my boyfriend goes up to my room to go get his phone off the charger. And after he went upstairs, my aunt was like, oh, I need to go throw up. So about 10 minutes goes past and my boyfriend's still up in the room grabbing his phone, so I went to check on him. And I walk upstairs to see my aunt and my boyfriend laying on my bed making out. Like for part 2. Part 2 to how I caught my aunt and my boyfriend hooking up at a family function. So like I said, they are laying on my bed making out. Doors wide open, they don't even bother to shut the door. And both of their shirts are off. And I think I should just put in here, my aunt is like 28. She's on my stepdad's side. She's really young. So they look up and my aunt's just like drunk as fuck looking at me. And she's like, do you want to join? Like, bitch, what the fuck? So I'm just like shook and I start screaming. Everybody rushes up the stairs and my mom pushes me out of the way and sees my boyfriend and my aunt laying on my bed with their shirts off. So my mom starts screaming at everybody. So my mom calls the cops, says that an adult is touching an underage boy, and she calls his mom,
tells her what happened. So my boyfriend and I broke up, so that spread around the whole school, and word got out that they actually started seeing each other.
Crazy ass story time about how my best friend's parents walked in on me sleeping with my best friend's brothers. And yes, I said brothers. So my freshman year, I became best friends with this girl. And she had 2 older, hot-ass brothers. One was in college, and one was a senior. Well, it was Christmas break, and her older brother from college was home. And my parents let me go with them to Florida for Christmas break. They had a super nice beach house, and I was sharing a room with my best friend. And the boys were sharing a room. And our room was connected because there was a bathroom in the middle. Well, my best friend got super sick the first 3 days of the trip, so she didn't do anything with us. So I was hanging out with the boys all the time. Well, the one night we were on the deck and we started to play Truth or Dare. And one of them asked, would you sleep with us? And I said, yeah. So at around 3 a.m., I snuck into the room and things started to get real nasty. There are kids on this app, so just use your imagination. And things started to get really loud and we woke their parents up, like for part 2. Part 2. So we thought that we woke their parents up and we heard someone walking up the stairs. So I ran into the bathroom, hid, and they asked if everything was okay. And I was just like, oh, I'm not feeling good. I think I caught whatever my best friend has. So they went back downstairs and we thought they went back to sleep. They were never asleep. So we decided to go onto the deck and finish the nastiness that we were doing. And I was like, oh, okay, we don't have to be that quiet now. Because their bedroom was in the front of the house and the porch was on the back of the house. And we were on the 2nd floor, and below that there was another porch with a fire pit and everything. And I could see below us. Well, out of the corner of my eye, I thought I saw somebody walk into the house. But stupid me, I just ignored it. Not even a minute later, I hear the sliding door open. And I hear, and we all turn around and everybody's standing there. So they sent me home and told my parents. But I didn't get grounded because low-key my mom knew I was a hoe.
Story time, my boyfriend beat up his ex-girlfriend because she tried to kill me. So it was my sophomore year in high school and I had just gotten with this guy who was fresh out of a relationship. And let me tell you a little bit about his ex-girlfriend. So before him and I even started dating, him and his ex-girlfriend were together for 2 years. And guys, this girl was fucking psychotic. Let me give you a quick example. Last year, I had a class with him and her, and the teachers assigned partners for this one project. Well, her boyfriend got paired up with this other girl. And anybody who would even talk to her boyfriend would get jumped by her and 8 of her friends. So his girlfriend starts being buddy-buddy with this girl. And his girlfriend goes, oh, do you want to come to the bathroom to hit my dab pen? So the girl says, yeah, thinking that she's being all nice and shit. So they both go to the bathroom and they're gone for 25 minutes. So I asked to go to the bathroom because I want to see what's going on. So I walk into the auditorium bathroom and nobody's really around that bathroom. And this bitch is getting beat the fuck up. Like for part 2. Okay, part 2. Okay, so like I said, I walk in and this bitch is getting her shit rocked. There were 5 girls in there beating the shit out of her. All of them just look at me, so I walk out and go back to the classroom. And the one girl went to the hospital and the other girl got suspended. So back to present day. So after school that day, I get a ride with him and his friends to his house. Well, as we're all driving to his house, we realize that his ex-girlfriend's car is right behind us. And it's literally her and all of her friends. And at this point, my boyfriend's really fed up with her shit. Because she keeps following me around school, texting me saying she's gonna kill me, saying he got her pregnant, always says that he's been cheating on me with her. So my boyfriend pulls over the car, and at this point, I think it's a trap. I'm like, oh shit, he's gonna let me get beat the fuck up. Well, he tells me to stay in the car. He gets out and walks over to her driver's door and tells her to get out of the car. So her and all her friends get out, and one of her friends starts punching him. While he's distracted with that, his ex runs over to the car, opens the door, and pulls out a fucking knife. Like for part 3. Okay, part 3. She fucking has a knife up to my neck, screaming at me. And I'm staying quiet as fuck because I do not want to get my throat slit by this bitch. So all I see is my boyfriend rip this bitch out of the car and start stomping her in the fucking ground. And whenever he went and ripped her out of the car, the knife slashed my leg open, so there's fucking blood everywhere. And we're at the beginning of his cul-de-sac, so all the fucking neighbors are outside watching him stomp this bitch into the ground. And then one of her friends comes around the other side of the car, grabs me by my hair, rips me out of the car, starts beating the shit out of me. So then one of his friends starts beating up that bitch too. So obviously the cops were called. My boyfriend went to jail. She also went to jail. And after that happened, my parents made me move schools. But after that, word got around that they were dating again. Good luck to the next bitch. Part 2 about the most embarrassing thing that ever happened to me in high school.
So like I said, the bitch that I hate is sitting out on her porch reading a fucking book at 11 o'clock at night. So I crouched down so she couldn't see me. I run to the car and my friend and I finally go to the party. Well, we get to that party and it's really boring, so we decided to go to a different one. And the party that we were about to go through was being thrown by the kid that I really liked. So I start hanging out with him when we get there. I'm drinking a lot, having so much fun, and I really have to go to the bathroom. And I didn't know where anything was at all. So I grabbed my friend and we're looking around everywhere for the bathroom. Because when I asked him, he was super drunk and really couldn't explain to me where the bathroom was. So we were pretty much left to fend for ourselves. But we ended up not being able to find a bathroom, and this is where I had to improvise. So my friend and I go to the laundry room and we see the litter box in there for the cat. Well, at this point, I was desperate, so I just went in the litter box. Well, 30 minutes later, the cops show up to the party. And everybody had to hurry up and leave because we did not want to get underages. Like for part 3, story time about one of the most embarrassing things that has ever happened to me in high school. So a little background information. I was in my freshman year of high school. Well, spring break was coming up. Well, the whole year, my friend and I hadn't been to one single party. So we decided that we wanted to try and go to a party every single day of spring break, which was about to be super difficult because we had to worry about my strict-ass parents and my neighbors. A little background info on my neighbor. My neighbor is this girl who's in my same grade, and she literally hates my guts. I don't know why, but literally anything that I do, she'll go and she'll tell her mom, and then her mom will tell my mom, because my mom and her mom are best friends. But before we know it, Saturday comes around, and we go back to school on Monday. We did not make it to one single party. Well, later that night, we found out that one of our friends was throwing one. So around 11 o'clock, everybody's sleeping, and I walk out my back door, hop over my fence, and I start heading towards the road where my friend was going to be parked. You know, who do I see fucking sitting outside on their porch reading a fucking book? My fucking neighbor. Like for part 2. Part 3 about the most embarrassing thing that ever happened to me in high school. So like I said, I went in the litter box and then the cops showed up. We all ran because we didn't want to get underages. I was able to sneak back into my house without anybody knowing. But when I get to school on Monday, everybody's talking about the party. And apparently the kid that I liked who threw the party, his parents didn't know that he threw one at all. And this was like during first period. So I went to text him and ask him if he was grounded because we were supposed to hang out the next day. And I realized that I am blocked. So I'm thinking, what the fuck? Why does he have me blocked? So I told my friend that he blocked me, and she goes, it's probably because he saw what you did in the laundry room. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, there's no fucking way that he knows. Because there was a door that led to the outside in the laundry room, there were cameras in there. So everybody saw this video of me. People were posting it on their Finstas, posting it on their Snapchat stories. It was so fucking embarrassing. Not to mention the bitch that I hate who lives next door showed my parents the fucking video, and I was grounded for fucking 4 months.
Part 2 about why I beat up my best friend. So like I said, I learned how to do my hair and makeup, and she went on vacation for like a month straight. Well, when she came home, she threw another party, and she was like, don't worry, after I'm done getting ready, I'll do your makeup and do your hair. And I was like, no, it's fine, I got it. She literally looks at me and she goes, are you sure? You don't really know how to do that. Like, it'll probably look really bad. And I'm like, why the fuck would you say that? She goes, no, like, I don't mean it to be rude. It's just that, like, I want you to look good in front of the boys and stuff like that. Like, sis tried to talk me into getting a shower for a full, like, 20 minutes. So after that, the whole night, she's literally being a pick-me girl. She's making all these comments about me in front of the boys. And I just keep brushing them off until her next party. We got ready and I put on these expensive shoes that I had just bought. And she goes, wow, you just like really like to copy my style, don't you? So she starts making comments that whole night about how my family's poor and stuff like that. And she threw up all over my shoes. So I dumped the trash can that everybody had threw up in that night on her, punched her in the face. But like 2 months later, she came to my house and apologized. Story time about why I beat up my best friend. So a little background information. Her and I had been best friends since we were in 7th grade. Her family was rich, mine was poor, and at first she was a really good friend. She was always there for me whenever I needed her, until our freshman year of high school, which is when her and I started hanging out with boys. Now, my mom was kind of strict. She wouldn't really let me hang out with boys, but her mom was more lenient about her hanging out with boys. Every weekend, she would throw a party at her house, and she would throw them in her attic because 1, it was huge, and 2, her parents didn't give a fuck what she did up there. Anyways, she would always offer to do my hair and makeup before the party started, which always made me really excited because I never really put any work into my physical appearance. Well, little did I know, the only reason why she would offer to do my hair and makeup at these parties was so that way she could make me look like shit in front of all the boys. So after that, I taught myself how to do my own makeup and do my own hair, like for part 2. Story time about how I was dating the school shooter. Yeah. So a little background information. I was a sophomore whenever this all happened, and it was around October.
Well, the one day I was sitting at lunch with my group of friends. We're all sitting there having a good time when one of my friends dares me to go over and sit with this one kid. And he was sitting alone, he was kind of shy. And of course I did because they had offered me $10, guys. Can't beat that. So I go over there, we start talking, and I realize that he's actually really nice. And he's really hot. I never really saw what he looked like because he was always wearing hoodies during school. Anyways, we started hanging out more, and eventually he said that he liked me and we started dating. The relationship seemed pretty perfect. Well, 6 months in, I think he started to trust me more because he had told me about this one group of girls that he absolutely hated. This group of girls just happened to be my friends. I didn't tell him that I was friends with these girls because they were considered controversial. Like for part 2. Story time about how this boy stabbed me with a pencil in kindergarten. So a little background information. I was 6 years old and in kindergarten, obviously. I'm not gonna lie, this story kind of shows that it doesn't matter how old a child is, they can literally still be very mean and yeah. Well, during the middle of the school year, there was this new kid who came to our class and his name was Freddie. Now, Freddie coming in the middle of the year was kind of sad because everybody already had their friends. They didn't really want to talk to the new kid. And what made it even worse was the fact that he was a teacher's pet and he was the teacher's favorite. So he was always picked to go up to the board and be the line leader, which made the kids hate him even more. For example, during lunch, Freddie would go and try to sit with some of the kids, and they would call the teacher over, say that he was doing something that was annoying them or really gross. And the teachers would remove him and put him at a table alone by himself. And I was one of the kids that didn't really make fun of him. I just kind of sat back and laughed, which I know is terrible. But like for part 2. Part 2 about this boy who stabbed me with a pencil in kindergarten. So like I said, everybody would pretty much bully him, and I was one of the kids that just sat back and laughed, didn't say anything to him directly. Eventually, we were getting in trouble for discluding him. We would all have to stay inside during recess with our heads down on the desk in the dark. Then everybody act like they were going to include him. Like the one time they were like, okay, we're playing hide and seek, you know, you go hide, and then they never went to find him. So then this kid actually started getting violent. My guess is because the teachers and principal were not doing anything about it. When everybody was walking, he would purposely trip kids. This one time, this girl brought in pencils for the whole class, and she didn't give him one. So he said that he felt sick the one day, and all the kids went out to recess, and he went around and broke every single pencil. And I came in and I found it, so I told the teacher. And then during nap time, he put his mat by me. And when I finally fall asleep, he literally comes over and stabs me in the back of the neck with a pencil. Story time about why I hate Valentine's Day. So a little background information. I was 22 years old and I had been dating this guy for almost a year. And we're gonna call him Jimmy. Most of Jimmy and I's relationship had been long distance because literally after 2 months of us dating, he was offered a job in a different state. And I never worried about him cheating on me or anything like that because he seemed like a really honest and genuine guy. But of course I was wrong because he said that he couldn't do anything for Valentine's Day because he had to work. So me, I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh, well, you know, I'm just gonna fly to him, you know, so we can spend Valentine's Day together. And it'll be a nice surprise. So a few days before Valentine's Day, I get my plane ticket and I wanted to do something special. So I wore some nice lingerie under a trench coat. Well, fast forward, my plane lands and I get an Uber to his apartment. And when I knock on his door, I hear a woman's voice from inside saying, don't worry, I'll get the door. Like for part 2. Part 2 about why I hate Valentine's Day. So like I said, I Uber to his apartment and I knock on the door and I hear some woman from inside say, don't worry, babe, I'll get it. So I hurry up and try to tie my coat because I had untied it thinking that my boyfriend was going to open the door. But no, why would my boyfriend open his own door to his own apartment that he lives alone in? So she opens the door and she's like, hi, what can I help you with? And I'm like, oh, is this apartment blah, blah, blah. And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, oh, well, is Jimmy here? And she was like, yeah. So she calls Jimmy over to the door. I look directly at him and I'm like, oh, is this like your friend or something? And she's like, excuse me, I'm his fiance. So I'm looking at him all confused and I start screaming that he's a liar, a cheater. He's like, babe, go call the police. I have no idea who this woman is. She sounds crazy. So his fiance walks away and he goes, I'm sorry, I'll call you later. And then security escorts me off the property. Needless to say, I never talked to him ever again.
Part 2 about the boy across the street who used to stalk me. So like I said, I saw him watching me outside his window, but I didn't want to overthink it, so I was just like, no, maybe he's looking at something else. Well, this all started a month after I moved in. Well, it started happening more frequently, so then I told his older brother. We're just gonna call the younger brother Mac. So he talked to Mac and then everything was fine for a week. Just a little information real quick. For the public school, the bus would arrive at 7:40. My private school started at 7 o'clock. So my mom would come and get me at 6:15 because my school was kind of far away. So like I said, it was a week later. Every morning that I would go outside to wait for my mom, Mac would be standing on his porch watching me. Oh, but it gets worse. So one night I was in my bedroom, right? And this is like some scary movie shit. I kept seeing something run past my window. My bedroom was on the first floor. So I told my dad about it and he put cameras outside. Well, Mac's older brother told me that Mac was always interested in my life. So me being a smart ass bitch, I told his older brother that our cameras didn't work, like for part 3. Part 3 about the boy that lived across the street who used to stalk me. So like I said, I told his older brother that our cameras didn't work anymore, knowing that he would tell Mac. Because he had it in his head for some reason that Mac wasn't obsessed with me. And the reason why I told him our cameras didn't work was because Mac was watching while the cameras were being set up outside. And after that, everything stopped. Except he would still be outside every single morning on his fucking porch watching me. So the one night while I'm sleeping, I wake up to some noise right outside my window. And my bed was on the same wall as the window, so I could see who was right outside my window, but they couldn't see me. Well, I look, and guess who the fuck it is? It's Mac trying to get inside of my fucking window. So I quietly call my dad, and it's like 3 in the morning. So I tell my dad what's going on. So he goes outside and nobody's there. Well, the next day we check the cameras. There's footage of him jerking off outside my window, trying to break into my room with a fucking crowbar. Luckily, I was staying at a friend's that night. Taking pictures of me outside my window. So we showed his parents. Then we moved and they sent him to a mental hospital. Story time about the girl who found out that I was hooking up with her boyfriend for 3 months straight. So a little background information. I was in high school, and there was this boy that I really liked. And I had a crush on him since I was in like 7th grade. And the only time he would talk to me is whenever he wanted me to send him nudes. Well, in high school, he got a girlfriend. But while he was dating her, he would still ask me for nudes. And of course, I would still send them. Well, the summer before my junior year, I got a job at this restaurant. Well, almost every single day, the guy that I liked would bring his girlfriend in. Because guess what? His dad owned the restaurant. We're gonna call this boy Alex. Well, the one night I was supposed to close with this girl, but she ended up having to leave because of a family thing. So Alex came in to help me close. And while we were there, we were talking. And this was like the longest that we ever talked. Well, he said, "Do you want to come over to my house after we're done?" So a bitch said yes. And we did the nasty and he took me home in the morning. Well, then he started coming in often to help me close. Well, 3 months later, as I'm closing, his girlfriend and her friends walk in like for part 2.
Part 2 about the girl who found out that I was hooking up with her boyfriend for 3 months straight. So like I said, the one night nobody could come in to help me close, and while I'm wiping off the counter, the girl and 3 of her friends walk in. I thought that she might have just forgot something because she was here earlier with her boyfriend, aka the guy that I was hooking up with. So I was super nice. I was like, "Hey, like, what do you need?" And literally, as soon as I finish my sentence, one of her friends comes up behind me and grabs me by my ponytail. And then his girlfriend, we're gonna call her Allie, she comes up and punches me straight in the middle of the mouth. Like literally, right in the middle of the mouth. I had to go to the dentist the next day because 2 of my teeth were missing. So then she goes and sits down at a table while she takes a video of 3 of her best friends beating the shit out of me. So then I'm sitting there, I could barely move. And then she plugs in one of those things that like guys shave their head with. And as soon as she figured out how to work the damn thing, it literally took her 10 minutes. My mom walks in because she had been waiting outside for 25 minutes at this point. So my mom called the cops and I pretty much won. My head wasn't shaved. I got a new set of teeth the next day and her boyfriend still hits me up.
Part 2 about how I almost got kidnapped by my online boyfriend. So like I said, I wake up in this abandoned farm shed. I don't have no clothes. I don't have a phone. So I try to run and he grabs me. He says that if you run, I will kill you. So I was like, okay, fine. What do you want from me? So he starts putting on lingerie and tells me to also put some on so we can take pictures together. What the actual you know what? So after that, he starts crying and he starts telling me his whole life story and how he's not who I think he is. Turns out that he's 32 and he just goes online pretending that he's 17 years old. So I just try to comfort him, right? It ends up working. He brings me my clothes, tells me to run, or else he's going to, once again, kill me. So I run, I go to this gas station, get picked up by the police, find my parents. Luckily for me, I paid attention to where everything was. He was arrested, he's still in prison to this day, and I got grounded for 3 months.
Story time about how I caught my grandma with my dad. So a little background information, I was 16, and it was the first day of 11th grade. When my friend wanted me to come to the mall with her after school that day, she was like, "Screw your grandma
grandma's birthday, just come to the mall with me. So the plan was I would sneak onto my best friend's bus after school and skip my grandma's birthday. By the way, my grandma was low-key a hoe. Like, half of her kids won't even bring their husbands around her, because after she got their numbers, she would end up sending nude pictures to them. Anyway, so the end of the day rolls around and I go to my locker to get my book bag when I'm called down to the office. So I go down to the office and my mom is there to pick me up because she said that we needed to do a few things before our grandma's party. Well, my grandma was at our house getting ready and my mom forgot her wallet at home, so when we went back home, I went to go put my book bag in the house. When I walk in and I see my grandma and dad on the couch, and I'm not even gonna say what they were doing, and my mom is walking past them like she didn't see anything. So after that, I called one of my aunts and asked if I could stay with her for a while, and now I don't talk to any of them. Part 3 about how my mom got with my sister's boyfriend. So like I said, obviously we could hear stuff. We saw their clothes on the floor, so I took a video and I took a picture. But obviously you couldn't see anything. And I didn't want to tell my dad first. So my best friend and I, we went downstairs, we went to the carnival. And when my sister got back, she ended up getting back with Ben because obviously after he was done, he went back to my sister. I know this is confusing, but try to keep up. So I asked my sister if she can pretty please take me and my friend down to the pool to go swimming. So my sister came down with us and then I was like, I have to tell you something. So then I ended up showing her the photos and the videos. And at this point, she's like, what the fuck? So surprisingly, without choking this man to death, she goes upstairs, she goes to sleep, and then the next morning she goes and has a talk with my mom. So my mom, my sister, my friend, and I, we all sat down at the buffet in the morning and had breakfast. And my dad and Ben weren't there. Well, long story short, my mom ended up saying, it's not fair that you bring all these young guys around me, da-da-da-da-da. Are you really gonna break up our family because of this? And till this day, my dad still does not know about it. Story time about how my boyfriend and best friend were sneaking around behind my back. So a little background information, I was 15 and in 10th grade. So my mom and dad were split up and I was pretty much allowed to do whatever I wanted because of that. So I was dating this boy named Jacob. Well, my best friend Alice literally hated him. Like low-key, every once in a while, she would try to break him and I up. And when I would call her out on it, she would just deny it. Anyway, so the one day I didn't go to school because I was super sick. So the whole day I was trying to text Jacob and Allison, but nobody was answering me. Which was extremely weird because no matter what, Allison would always text me back. So after I knew the school ended, I went to Allison's house. Nobody was answering the door, so I used the spare key. I walk in and all I hear is a very loud banging coming from her bedroom. So I walk in, I see my boyfriend and her together, and then he starts saying that she drugged him. So I went on his phone, I see a bunch of old text messages between him and her, and them exchanging pictures. And then sis wants to start giving me an attitude, so I punched her in the face, and then I left and I don't talk to either of them. Story time about how I almost got kidnapped by my online boyfriend. So a little background information, I was 16 and in 11th grade. So a year before this all happened, I posted a picture on Instagram saying, add me on Snapchat if you want to be friends. Yes, I was that person. Anyway, so this really cute guy adds me on Snapchat. And after about 3 months talking, he said that he wants to meet me in person. And he didn't sound sus at all, so I was like, sure. So we met at this park that was like 30 minutes away. And we met there around 6 o'clock, so when the sun was setting. And he was super nice. It was super romantic. Well, then we went to his house. We watched a movie and we did the nasty. So after that, he asked me if I want a drink. And what I could have swore was 20 minutes later, I wake up in an abandoned farm shed. No clothes or anything. So I start screaming my head off. I don't have my phone or anything, so I start to run. And then he grabs me. He says, if you try to run or you try to scream, I am going to kill you. Like for part 2 about how I almost got kidnapped by my online boyfriend. So like I said, I wake up in this abandoned farm shed. I don't have no clothes. I don't have a phone. So I try to run and he grabs me. He says that if you run, I will kill you. So I was like, okay, fine. What do you want from me? So he starts putting on lingerie and tells me to also put some on so we can take pictures together. What the actual you know what? So after that, he starts crying and he starts telling me his whole life story and how he's not who I think he is. Turns out that he's 32 and he just goes online pretending that he's 17 years old. So I just try to comfort him, right? It ends up working. He brings me my clothes, tells me to run, or else he's going to, once again, kill me. So I run, I go to this gas station, get picked up by the police, find my parents. Luckily for me, I paid attention to where everything was. He was arrested, he's still in prison to this day, and I got grounded for 3 months. Story time, my best friend slept with my boyfriend on my birthday. So a little background information. I was 16 and a sophomore in high school. Well, I had this best friend who we are going to call Sarah. Her and I became super close over the summertime, but she was like on and off best friends with this other girl.
who we're gonna call Mackenzie. But I had this boyfriend who I was also really on and off with. And Sarah knew about all the problems within our relationship. Well, I guess I underestimated how close Sarah and Mackenzie were, because everything that I told Sarah, she went back and she told Mackenzie. And not to mention, Mackenzie was really close with my boyfriend. So of course, she told my boyfriend everything that I was saying. This ended up causing a huge fight between my boyfriend and I. Well, the night before my birthday, my boyfriend and I were going back and forth arguing, and around 12 a.m. on my birthday, I forced myself to fall asleep. And at around 1 a.m., I woke up to 20 Snapchat notifications, all from my boyfriend. And when I opened them, I saw the worst thing ever. Like for part 2. Part 2 about how my best friend slept with my boyfriend on my birthday. So like I said, I woke up at around 1 a.m. to 20 Snapchat notifications from my boyfriend. And I saw the absolute worst thing ever. The first 5 notifications were just him calling me names. And then all the other ones were just him doing stuff with my best friend. And you guys can already guess what I mean by doing stuff. So at this point, I was heartbroken, I was pissed off, but of course, because I gotta have the receipts, I went and took a video off my sister's phone of everything that he sent me. In the morning, I woke up to a text from an unknown number, and it turned out to be my boyfriend's best friend saying that him and Sarah were now together. So my boyfriend asked me to meet up and apologize. So I met him at this park, and he apologized to me, telling me that he wanted to get back together with me. But I told him to KMA, and I left. Then Sarah came to my house and keyed my car, and then we fought on my front lawn. And then after that, she was texting me about how she was coming back to my house, like for part 3. Story time about how my grandma almost got me grounded. So a little background information, I was 14 and in 8th grade. And there was this boy that I really liked who lived like 10 minutes away from me. So the one night he asked me if I wanted to hang out. And my mom was strict about me not hanging out with people after 7 o'clock at night. Especially a boy. I wasn't even allowed to hang out with boys. And my grandma, my mom, and my brother and I all lived together. And we all had our own rooms. Mine was on the first floor of the house, so I snuck out the window and I went and hung out with him. So I snuck out at around 3 and came back at around 4 a.m. And my grandma comes into my room to wake me up for school. And I guess that I had been laying on my side and my hair was like pulled up, because literally all I remember waking up to is her smacking me up out of my sleep and screaming at me because there was a hickey on my neck. She's like, I'm telling your mom whenever she gets home, your window's gonna be screwed shut. And I keep telling her it's not a hickey, so she calls my brother over. And he's like, yeah, that's definitely a hickey, because he likes to kiss her ass. Like for part 2. Part 2 about how my grandma almost got me grounded. So like I said, she's like, I'm telling your mom, and I keep telling her that it's not a hickey. And thankfully, my mom already went to work. She had work at 6 a.m. So I get on the bus, I go to school, and I'm talking to my friend and telling her about how I'm literally gonna be crucified whenever I get home. And she told me about how her older sister was in like the same situation that I'm in now. So she texted her older sister asking what she did because she never got caught. And I was like, okay, well, if she used makeup, my mom's gonna find out because she's not dumb. Well, apparently her older sister burnt herself with a curling iron. Yes, literally burnt herself, but she ended up getting away with it. So fast forward, I get home at around 3 o'clock and I sneak in through the back door so that way my grandma won't see that I came in the house, because she literally would have made me sit in the living room until my mom got home. So I go upstairs and I burn myself with a curling iron, which is not fun. Like for part 3. Part 3 about how my grandma almost got me grounded. So like I said, I snuck in through the back door so that way my grandma wouldn't see me, because if she saw me, she would have made me wait in the living room with her until my mom got home. So, you know, burnt myself with the curling iron and my mom gets home. And since I'm on the first floor, I can literally hear my grandma talking to my mom and my brother, of course. My grandma's like, yeah, she has hickeys all over her neck, which is literally an exaggeration because there was one small one. So my mom calls me out to the living room. I go out and she's like, all right, show it to me. And I'm like, show you what? She's like, don't play stupid. Your grandma already told me the whole situation. And I was like, Mom, I literally burnt myself with a curling iron. And my grandma's like screaming and freaking out because I'm lying. She's like, you better tell your mother the truth right now. Da 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 da. So I show the burn to my mom. She looks at my grandma and she's like, so you're gonna tell me that's not a burn on her neck? And she was like, that's not how it looked this morning, blah, blah, blah. So I got away with it, but now my grandma literally stalks me to see if I'm doing anything wrong so she can tell my mom. Is a $40 foundation better than a $9 foundation? The two foundations that we have going up against each other are the She Glam Complexion Pro and the Airbrush Flawless Foundation. This at least looks like it's $30. So on this side, I'm going to do the She Glam foundation, and on the other side, I'm going to do the Charlotte Tilbury foundation. First things first, both of these foundations claim to have a matte finish that lasts all day, and it
is supposed to feel like nothing is on your face. Also, both of these are supposed to be full coverage, and that's good to put to the test today because I do have a few blemishes. I am in literal shock right now. This is a dupe for the Charlotte Tilbury foundation. $9, $40, no beauty filter. They both look and feel the exact same way. Run. Do not walk, run. And everybody can run because there are 30 shades. Like, I'm sorry, you will never catch me spending $40 on a foundation ever again.
Story time about how my best friend and I were dating the same guy. So a little background information, I was 15 and it was my freshman year of high school. And I had been dating this guy for 3 months who we're gonna call Jacob. He was a part of the popular group and was known for cheating on all his past girlfriends. But why would I see that as a red flag? Because I'm fucking dumb. Anyways, of course he was cheating on me too, and people would tell me that. First I wanted to leave him, but the problem was he came from a super rich family and he was really cute. So in reality, I really only wanted to stay with him so that way he would keep spoiling me with expensive gifts. He would literally buy me anything and everything I wanted. So my best friend, who we can call Taylor, she came over for a sleepover. The whole night we talked about Jacob cheating on me and she asked me why I had not broken up with him yet. So I told her why I wouldn't leave and then she hyped me up. She was like, period sis, do what you gotta do. Well then I came up with this super good plan for my best friend and I both to get gifts from him and use him. So then I came out and I said, you should be his side chick. Like for part 2. Part 2 about how my best friend and I were dating the same guy. So like I said before, he was cheating on me 24/7, but he was spending money on me 24/7. That's the reason why I wouldn't leave him. So then I told my best friend that she should be his side chick. So that way we could both use him for his money. So Taylor started flirting with him to try and make him want her too. And I may have given it a little push by giving her his Snapchat, so she tried to slide in his DMs and then also tried texting him on Snapchat. At first, his cheating ass did not want to do anything with her. And I was like, the one time. Anyways, he was like, I'm with your best friend right now. I don't think we should do this. But of course, like all boys who cheat, he ended up meeting up with her. And they started sneaking around. Meanwhile, I knew all the tea. Taylor was telling me everything. Taylor started getting things from him 24/7 and he looked so stupid. Well, then we decided to fuck with him one more time. Like for part 3. Story time about how my best friend and I were dating the same guy at the same time. So like I said, she was sneaking around with him. Meanwhile, she was telling me everything. He was buying her gifts, he was buying me gifts, so everything was perfect. But we had one little trick left up our sleeves. We decided that we would both make a wish list and put everything that we wanted on there. And at the end of the month, we would have a sleepover, bring everything that we got. Well, on the night of the sleepover, we brought everything, and let me tell you, this filled up my king-size bed. There was stuff all on the floor. So what did I do? I took a video of it, and I uploaded it to Instagram, tagging him and his friends, and wrote a long-ass caption, basically saying, if you cross me, this is what will happen. You'll get played. He was so embarrassed, his friends and everyone at school basically laughed at his dumb ass. Well, he ended up telling his mommy about it, and they came and talked to my parents, and they pretty much just told them to get the fuck over it, like your son did what he did willingly. She didn't do anything wrong. She meaning me. My dad was kind of mad at me, but my mom was super impressed about it, and we laugh about it all the time.
I got my sister's boyfriend to fall in love with me, her life turned to misery. No, I didn't regret it. Disclaimer, is not my story time, was sent to me on Instagram. One day I went up to my sister and told her that her boyfriend had kissed me. First she thought I was making it up to make her jealous. Told me I could never compete with her and that she was the more beautiful sister out of the two of us. Which is wrong. So I handed her my phone so that she could see all the messages that her boyfriend and I had been sending each other. And that's when she lost it. She started wailing on me. She started slapping and kicking me. My parents ran into her room and asked her what was wrong. I told my parents that I treated my sister the way she treated me. She would always go after my boyfriends, flirt with them, and try to get them to break up with me. Of course, my parents didn't agree with me, so they were really angry. They separated us, but my sister went crazy. She called her boyfriend and told him to come over. Obviously, he didn't know that she already knew at the time. And when he came over, she started beating him up. Grabbed a pan from the kitchen and started swinging at him. She actually ended up giving him a concussion. After that, she begged for his forgiveness, but he still broke up with her. At the end of the day, he ended up leaving her. She was so stupid for begging him to stay with her. Her boyfriend even asked me if we could be together, and I told him no. I told him that the whole time I had just been playing him just to get back at my sister. Which I know is so cruel, but he deserved it. After that, my sister and I decided to make peace. She told me that she wouldn't mess with my boyfriend
boyfriends anymore and that she would stop being evil. But after a month of having my new boyfriend, I found her flirting with him too. I told her if she didn't stop that I would make her life miserable once again. I'm pretty sure she has a boyfriend, but she doesn't want to tell my family. Cause she knows that I'll go after him and I would probably end up making him fall in love with me too. But at this point, I just don't know what to do. What should I do? She's so evil and I want to make her life miserable. Bye.
Story time about how I became an IG model / escort for billionaires. Tell you that last month I made $60,000. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it's sending me on Instagram. So at the beginning I had to lie about my age. I'm really 36 years old, but I say I'm 22. I do look a lot younger than I am, and of course I get filler and Botox. I started my Instagram account 6 years ago. My inspirations were Anna Cherie, Amanda Lee, Sam JoJo, and Abigail Ratchford. I mean Abigail Ratchet. I basically copied all of these girls' pictures. Within a month of starting my Instagram account, I had 10,000 followers. And yes, all of them were males. But I didn't really start making money until 2018. You know, like every other girl on Instagram, I signed up for OF. And that's when I started making serious money. But I was also making money from Instagram. Brands would send me clothes and watches and protein powder, stuff like that. Eventually, I became an ambassador for one of the biggest Instagram clothing stores. I think we all know what I'm talking about. Fashion Hova, and I started making a lot of money then. So I basically started living above my means. I got myself a new apartment in Beverly Hills, and it was $6,000 a month. I also got myself a Mercedes, and I would exclusively shop at Air One. I would also go shopping at Rodeo Drive almost every day because I wanted the paparazzi to get pictures of me. And I even called the paparazzi on me a few times, so I had to pay them like $2,000 out of pocket. So yeah, I was spending a lot of money. Whatever money I got that month, I would literally spend it by the end. One month I spent $25,000 going out with friends. I would usually pick up the bill. This is what started getting me into trouble. Part 2 is
Story time about how I became an IG model / escort for billionaires. After I spent the $25,000 in 1 month, I decided I needed another income source. So I thought of escorting. One of my very good friends in LA was also an escort, and she told me about it, but I was like, I can't do that. But one day I called her and she told me everything. She gets contacted through Instagram by very, very rich men, like billionaires. I honestly didn't believe her at first, but then she showed me receipts. Her bank account had more than $1 million in it. She told me that she had only been doing it for 6 months. She put me in contact with several people and they had to verify a bunch of my stuff. But then after a week, I was finally in. I was really scared. I had to go get my passport renewed. This meant that I was going to be traveling internationally with men that I didn't know. A few days later, I get a message on Instagram from an account. The guy that owned this account was clearly very rich. It wasn't him contacting me, it was his assistant. He got my information and 2 days later, I was on a private plane. I landed in a foreign country and I spent the entire weekend with this guy. He didn't speak English. Basically took me around his city and showed me off for his friends. I honestly didn't feel uncomfortable at any point and he didn't try anything. In fact, he was actually super shy, but his friends on the other hand were really handsy. Part 3 is up.
Story time about how my neighbor killed my dog. So a little background information. When I was about 3 years old, my parents got me a German Shepherd. And my neighbors who lived next to us absolutely loved our dog. And so did their kids. Like their dad literally put a doggy door in the fence so that way our dog could go back and forth from our house to his house. Well, when I was about 8 years old, my neighbors decided to sell their house. So he told us that he had to take out the doggy door because the people that were buying his house hated animals. Well, the people who had just bought his house, they ended up moving in before he could take out the doggy door. So our new neighbors asked us if we could put like a piece of plywood in front of the door so that way our dog couldn't get through. And they said that they would do the same to their side of the fence. So my dad said, yeah, he put a piece of plywood in front of there. Well, my dog, Gabe, the one night that my brother let him out, he ended up getting the plywood off of the doggy door. Well, my brother literally had to crawl through the doggy door to get the dog before one of them saw him in the yard. Like for part 2 about how my neighbors killed my dog. So like I said, my brother let the dog out and my dog got the piece of plywood off of the door. And my brother had to crawl through the doggy door to get my dog out of our neighbor's yard so that way our neighbors wouldn't wake up and know that he got through. But whenever my brother went to go get Gabe, he realized that my neighbors didn't even have a piece of plywood on their side of the fence or anything. So my brother told my dad, and my dad went over there the next day to talk to them. And he pretty much said, I'm not going to have a piece of fucking plywood on my side of the fence if you're not going to be doing anything on yours to prevent my dog from going into your yard. And they were like, oh, well, your old neighbors never took out the doggy door. And my dad was like, that's not our fucking fault. Well, then our new neighbors said, if your dog all of a sudden becomes sick or just does not come back, don't be surprised. My dad decided to replace the door himself. Well, once Gabe realized that the doggy door was gone, when we would let him outside, he would literally just sit there and bark at the fence. Well, 2 weeks later, Gabe ended up passing away. And we found out it's because our neighbors were giving him rat poison.
Story time about how I found my husband's secret phone. Disclaimer is not my story time, it's sent me on Instagram. I found 5 dating apps and 2 secret girlfriends on his phone. And I can't even begin to tell you what I found on Instagram. Up until this point, my husband and I had the utmost respect and trust for each other. I never once thought he was capable of doing this. Literally every woman says that when they find out their man is cheating. Around 6 months ago, my husband started a new job. He's in tech and makes a lot of money, so I've been able to stay at home with our kids. We now have 2 kids, and they're both 2 and 5. Our life is amazing. Our parents live near us. We always make time for each other and go out on dates. We even take solo trips on the weekends. Last year, we went to Bali for 2 weeks. My point is, we always make time for each other. When he started his new job, he started earning more money. But this also meant that he took on a lot more work. He was always so stressed out. My husband and I met in college, and we studied the exact same thing. We both worked for the same company. Eventually, I retired to take care of our kids. So when he got his new job, I offered to help him out with his work. He was actually really grateful for this, and we were both doing a really good job. He was working from home 3 days out of the week, so it was a great situation. We were spending time together, working together, and the kids were spending more time with their dad. His new job gave him a new cell phone, and this is the cell phone that I would usually use to help him out with his work and his laptop. Part 2 is up. Story time about how I found my husband's secret cell phone, his 2 girlfriends, and his 5 dating apps. Disclaimers is not my story time, it's me on Instagram. I started using his work cell phone to help him out with his job, and he kept his own cell phone. This is when I started noticing that he would make a big deal about losing his phone. Anytime he would misplace it, he would go absolutely berserk. Now, I thought it was just because he was stressed about work, till I realized it wasn't stress. He forgot to silence his phone one night and the notifications were going off. I woke him up and asked him to turn it off. My mind did not go to him cheating. I thought it was work-related stuff. Then I realized it was his personal phone that was going off, not his work phone. The next day, he apologized for having his work notifications on, and I said, but it wasn't your work phone, it was your personal phone. And he said, no, it wasn't. And I said, yes, it was. And that's when he accused me of being paranoid and crazy. And that's when I knew he was cheating. I had to keep it cool though. I was feeding the kids in the kitchen when this all happened. On this day, he was gonna go to work. I knew that he was going to take his personal and his work phone with him to the office. So what I did was change the phone covers on each phone and flip them upside down. He grabbed the work phone thinking it was his personal phone. He put it in his pocket and went to the bathroom. And he left his work phone, which was his personal phone, on the countertop. I told him that maybe I should keep it just in case I needed to answer emails, and he said yes. He left and I had his phone all to myself. As soon as I opened his personal phone, I went straight to the messages and I found his 2 girlfriends, Laura and Missy. Part 3 is
Story time about why I made my boyfriend stop being friends with his girl best friend. So a little background information. I was in my sophomore year of high school, and my boyfriend and I had been dating for about 6 months. And he had been best friends with this girl, we're gonna call her Addie, for about 3 years. Now, I had known Addie way before that, probably since we were in kindergarten. But her and I weren't like BFFs, we were more of acquaintances. But obviously we became friends because she was always around my boyfriend. A month after him and I started dating, I decided that we had to set boundaries for their friendship. Because they had first period together, right? Well, every morning at 9:45, I would go on Snapchat and I would see a picture of them. And it would be her kissing him on the cheek. Not only would it be on her story, but it would also be on his. And I had her on Snapchat before that. She had never done that, ever. So he said that he had talked to Addie about it, right? And things were good for the next 2 months. Then they were forced to work together on a project. Like for part 2. Part 2 about why I made my boyfriend stop being friends with his girl best friend. So like I said, they had been forced to work together on a school project. At least that's what he told me. So I brushed it off because I was not about to seem like the jealous girlfriend. Well, the next day, him and I were supposed to go out to the movies. So I texted him right before we were about to leave, and I said, hey, are you on your way to get me? He goes, OMG, no, I'm sorry, I forgot. I have to work with Addie on this project. She's about to come over my house. So at this point, I'm like really pissed off. So I text him and I say, I thought you guys had a whole week to work on this project. Why does it have to be tonight? Addie knew that him and I were supposed to go to the movies that night also. He said, we just want to get it done really quickly so that way I can spend the rest of the week with you. And she's snapping me the whole time that she's at his house, off of his phone. So at around 1:30 a.m., I get a Snapchat from her on his account, and she's laying on his chest. Like for part 3.
Story time about the day my husband attacked me and put me in the hospital. Disclaimers is not my story time, it's sent me on Instagram. My husband and I had been married for 7 years. 3 years into the marriage, he started sleeping on the couch. We would constantly fight back then because of several things. Number 1, I knew he was cheating on me, but he would never admit to it. Number 2, I wanted to have children, but he didn't want to at the time. Number 3, he never wanted to spend time with me and always prioritized his friends. And this was around the time that he started getting physically violent. Because we'd already been married for a few years at that point, I never saw him as a violent person. It all started by him shoving me one time during an argument. But he shoved me so hard I fell to the ground and ended up bruising my chin. And even though this was a big problem between me and him, it became an even bigger problem between me and my family. As soon as my parents saw the bruise, they started accusing him of beating me. And of course, my first instinct was to defend my husband. My parents begged me to stay with them and I didn't. I went back to my husband and demanded an apology, but he wouldn't even look me in the face. He told me he basically did not care. Once he started sleeping on the couch, it was just like we were roommates. We stayed like this for years. Anytime we got into an argument, he would just look for something to throw at me. One day he threw a jewelry box at me and I ended up in the ER. And of course, the hospital thought it was my husband. So I lied and said that I tripped. And unfortunately, I went straight back to my husband. Part 2 is tell him about the day my husband attacked me and put me in the hospital. Disclaimer, it's not my story time, it's sent me on Instagram. After years of him pushing me, shoving me, throwing things at me, and even slapping me, I became so numb to it. It would get me really angry and upset at the moment, but as soon as he would apologize, we would just go back to normal. But even our normal wasn't normal. We didn't sleep in the same bed. He was never really home, and when he was always playing video games. This was also around the time that he lost his job, so for 5 years, I was basically the breadwinner. He told me he didn't want to get a job and he wanted to play video games. I didn't tell him anything because I didn't want it to turn into a fight, but I was angry at the thought that I had to now support him. But like I said, my parents did not like him at all. They knew something was up because I always had some sort of bruise. My parents made it a habit of showing up unannounced to our house. I was actually really grateful to my parents. This didn't upset me at all. But my husband, on the other hand, hated my parents. One day he asked me, why do they even care about you so much? You're not that important. Around a year ago, I started feeling really sick all the time. At the time, I didn't know why. One day, I walk into the kitchen and see my husband holding eye drops in his hand, but he quickly put it away. I asked him why he was holding them, and he said nothing, mind your own business. So I did. A few months later, I'm having a conversation with a coworker, and he told me a story about somebody using eye drops on someone else to make them sick. This is when it all clicked. I had all these weird stomach issues, and I never realized that it was him putting eye drops in my coffee. This is when I decided to file for divorce. Instead of filing for divorce and leaving him, I went home and told him that I was going to get a divorce. He grabbed a hammer and started chasing me. I locked myself in the bathroom. Part 3 is up.
Part 3 about why I made my boyfriend stop being friends with this girl best friend. So like I said, she snaps me at 1:30 in the morning, a picture of her laying on his chest, and it's captioned, "Hey girlie, I hope you don't mind, but I have to spend the night at his house. He lost track of time working on our project and it's way too late for him to take me home." So at this point, I'm furious and I don't snap her back. So the next morning, I call my boyfriend. And I asked him, "Hey, is Addie still there?" So he says yeah, and then I ask him to put me on speakerphone. So when he does, I say hi to Addie. She goes, "OMG, hey girl, how are you?" And that's when I pretty much go off on this bitch. I tell him that while he was asleep, she was sending me pictures of her laying on top of him off of his Snapchat, and that she was sending those type of pictures to multiple people on his Snapchat because my best friend had texted me that morning saying that she thought that we broke up because Addie was sending her pictures of her laying on top of him. So I tell him, pick me or her. And she starts crying. After a minute of silence, he hangs up the phone and then blocks me. Good luck to the next girl.
Story time, I had to go to jail because of my toxic ex-boyfriend. So a little background information. Him and I started dating right after high school. And this relationship was so fucking toxic. We would literally fight over the dumbest shit. So fast forward 4 years later, the one night he had his friends over and he wanted me to cook steak. I decided to cook chicken instead. And this is what triggered the entire fucking fight. He was saying things like, "You never listen to what I say, you can't turn a hoe into a housewife," type of shit. So he pretty much blew up and was like trying to kick me out of our house. He went to our master bedroom, started breaking all my shit, throwing it down the stairs, and his friends left me there with his crazy ass. So I tried to get him to stop, but he wouldn't, of course. But then he ended up calling his fucking sister, who is 10 years older than me, trying to get her to come to my house and kick my ass. I never really got in a fight like this, so I decided to call 911. She heard him in the background going crazy like for part 2. Part 2 of why I had to go to jail because of my toxic ex-boyfriend. So like I said, the dispatcher on the phone could hear him in the background going absolutely fucking psycho. So she told me to hide. I ran upstairs into the master bedroom and locked the door until they came. So they interviewed us separately, and he has the nerve to start fucking crying, saying that I was beating his ass, and he even fucking scratched himself. So even though I called 911, they said in a domestic dispute they had to take somebody to jail. And since he had visible marks on him, they took me to jail. So the police officer told me to take off all my clothes and to only wear one layer and to also take out my shoelaces before he brought me in. So they booked me in jail, put me in a freezing cold fucking cell with 25 other actual bad bitches for 7 hours. And this is the best part. My ex kept trying to call and get me out the whole time I was in there, saying that he lied and everything. They set a court date for me, but when I showed up, they literally just dropped all the charges. Now I just tell everybody that I've been to jail and I'm not scared to go back.
Story time about how my father is obsessed with me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I'm sending me on Instagram. And trigger warning. My mom and dad had me when they were very, very young. My mom was 14 years old when she got pregnant with me. From what my mom told me, my parents were pretty much together throughout the whole pregnancy. Even though they were both in high school, they wanted to move in together and try to raise me like a regular family. But my maternal grandmother had a very big issue with this. She wanted my mom to continue going to high school and possibly even give me up for adoption. But my mom was not having it, so she decided to move out with my dad. Once I was born, unfortunately, my parents just couldn't take care of me. My dad was too busy playing his football and trying to get a scholarship, and my mom just didn't really know how to take care of a child. I mean, she was a child herself. This is when my grandmother stepped in and decided to take me in, which I thank God for every single day of my life. My grandmother raised me as her own daughter, and she has been the most amazing woman in my entire life. My parents split up, and through most of my childhood, I lived with my mom and my grandmother. I didn't see my dad for about 10 years. By the time I saw him again, I was 15 years old. Part 2 is a story time about how my father is obsessed with me. Disclaimer, is not my story time, it's that I mean on Instagram. And trigger warning. I finally saw my father again when I was 15 years old. From the moment he saw me, he wanted to hug me and kiss me all the time. At first, I thought it was normal because he's my father and he hadn't seen me in over 10 years. After a few weeks of him coming to visit me, I started feeling really strange. This was also around the time where I was getting noticed by boys in school. And you know that feeling you get when you know a guy likes you? Well, that's the feeling I started getting from my own father. Every time he touched me, it was like too touchy. And every kiss was just strange. One of the things that really started to bother me was that he liked going to the beach, and he wanted to make it a thing. He would always say, let's go to the beach on the weekend, but I didn't feel comfortable with him. First off, he never invited my mom to come or my grandma, so it was always just me and him. He even took me shopping for bikinis, and this is when my stomach dropped. At the bikini shop, he asked for small bikinis, like the type that show a lot of skin. Told him I wasn't comfortable with that. I wanted a bathing suit. He said no and bought me a thong bikini. He stared at me all day at the beach. Part 3 is up. Story time about how my father is obsessed with me, part 3. After he bought me the thong bikini and forced me to wear it at the beach, I noticed he was staring at me. I wrapped myself in a towel and told him I wanted to leave. After that, I told my mom and my grandma how I felt about my dad. They thought that I was exaggerating, but I knew that I wasn't. My mom asked him to never ever do anything like that again, and he said he wouldn't. After that, he would always do certain things, like stare at me too much, or always want to hug me and kiss me. And for my own comfort and safety, I put a lot of space between him and I. When I was 18, I finally got my first boyfriend. He became enraged when my mom told him. He told my mom that I was acting like a slut. That's when I cut him out completely from my life. A year later, I got on Instagram, and that's when he started following me there. He started leaving strange comments on all my pictures, and eventually he started offering me money to spend more time with him. I told him I wasn't comfortable with him. That's when he told me that all he wanted to do was watch me take a bath, and that he would pay me thousands if I let him. My grandmother and my mom have completely cut him out of our lives. On the day of my wedding, we hired security to keep him away. And of course, he managed to show up, but security kicked him out. I'm thinking I should get a restraining order. Luckily, my mental health hasn't suffered too much from this. He's obviously an unwell person, but I actually feel really bad for him. And I feel like getting a restraining order is just gonna make things worse. What the heck should I do? Bye.
Story time. My best friend slept with my boyfriend on my birthday. So a little background information. I was 16 and a sophomore in high school. Well, I had this best friend who we are going to call Sarah. Her and I became super close over the summertime, but she was like on and off best friends with this other girl who we're gonna call Mackenzie. But I had this boyfriend who I was also really on and off with. And Sarah knew about all the problems within our relationship. Well, I guess I underestimated how close Sarah and Mackenzie were, because everything that I told Sarah, she went back and she told Mackenzie. And not to mention, Mackenzie was really close with my boyfriend. So of course, she told my boyfriend everything that I was saying. This ended up causing a huge fight between my boyfriend and I. Well, the night before my birthday, my boyfriend and I were going back and forth arguing, and around 12 a.m. on my birthday, I forced myself to fall asleep, and at around 1 a.m., I woke up to 20 Snapchat notifications, all from my boyfriend. And when I opened them, I saw the worst thing ever. Like for part 2. Part 2 about how my best friend slept with my boyfriend on my birthday. So like I said, I woke up at around 1 a.m. to 20 Snapchat notifications from my boyfriend, and I saw the absolute worst thing ever. The first 5 notifications were just him calling me names, and then all the other ones were just him doing stuff with my best friend. And you guys can already guess what I mean by doing stuff. So at this point, I was heartbroken, I was pissed off, but of course, because I gotta have the receipts, I went and took a video off my sister's phone of everything that he sent me. In the morning,
morning, I woke up to a text from an unknown number, and it turned out to be my boyfriend's best friend saying that him and Sarah were now together. So my boyfriend asked me to meet up and apologize. So I met him at this park, and he apologized to me, telling me that he wanted to get back together with me. But I told him to KMA, and I left. Then Sarah came to my house and keyed my car, and then we fought on my front lawn. And then after that, she was texting me about how she was coming back to my house. Like for part 3. Part 3 about how my best friend slept with my boyfriend. So like I said, she came to my house and she keyed my car. And I caught her, so I went outside. We fought on my front lawn. After she left, she kept sending me messages saying that she was coming back to my house so we could fight again. But she was blocked, so I didn't get any of the messages. And then my ex came to my house and brought me flowers. And this was all in a span of one day. So because it was my birthday party, my cousins were at my house, and I already told them everything that happened. So they went outside and they fought him. Well, then I ended up sending all the videos to his parents, her parents, his siblings, aunts, uncles, cousins who loved me. Then I also decided to take legal action, and I sent the cops all of the screenshots of Sarah harassing me. And my sister got a video of us fighting, so I sent that to them too. Well, since she was 18 and I literally just turned 16, she got 3 months in county jail for minor harassment and minor physical altercations. So in the end, I think I won.
Story time about how I did the dirty with my cousin. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I repeat, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. Okay, before you all judge me, I come from a very small town. Very small. Background, my entire family and I come from a very small town. For miles and miles around us, there is nothing. The only thing around us to do is really just go to the mall. Growing up, my cousin and I weren't really close. He was always trying to bother me and he was always mean. I also didn't have siblings, but my dad did have kids with another woman, so I had a couple of stepsisters. But growing up, my stepsisters would compete with me in everything, school and boys. Our school only had 80 kids in it. So by the time I turned 17, the only boy that I was ever interested in ended up moving away from my town. And this boy didn't even know that I existed. At this point, my cousin had gone away for a couple of years, but then came back. And when he came back, the attraction was instant. I know you guys all want to gag right now, but like I said, I had no other options for boys. Remember I said my cousin used to bother me a lot? Well, one day he came up to me in school and apologized. And we both knew we were attracted to each other, so we just kept talking. One day he just grabbed me and kissed me. Part 2 is up. Story time about how I did the dirty with my cousin. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I repeat, this is not my story time. It's sent me on Instagram. My cousin kissed me for the first time that day. By the way, we were in school. He asked me to go behind one of the buildings in school. Out of nowhere, he grabbed me and kissed me. This was the first time I'd ever been kissed. So instantly, I was infatuated. And then after that, every single day we would go behind that building and kiss some more. And trust me, we both had conversations all the time about how we were cousins. But the problem was there was nobody in our town that we were interested in. So his parents, who are my uncles, suddenly they started inviting my parents over to their house. So we would all go have dinner at their house and hang out sometimes. And my cousin and I would take advantage and go make out in his room. No one ever thought to check on us. I mean, why would they? We're cousins. One of those times that we went over, we did the dirty. My cousin just started going for it and I didn't stop him. I wanted him to do it, all while our parents are downstairs. And then we kept doing it every day. After about a year, he had to move away for school. And to this day, nobody knows what we did. I haven't seen him in about 5 years, but trust me, if we saw each other again, I think we would do it again. Is that gross? I mean, I know it is, but whatever. Bye.
Story time. I'm in a long distance relationship and I don't know if I should break up with this boy or not. So a little background information. Him and I were best friends for almost a month before we started dating. And literally as soon as we started dating, he started asking me for nudes. And I would be like, no, not tonight, I'm tired. And then he would keep asking me why. And then he would start to make me feel guilty about not wanting to send him nudes. Eventually, he would just say, it's fine, I'll just wait until we can do physical things together. And he still has, quote, his hoes on Snapchat. And he still has all of their nudes and everything. And literally the day before we started dating, he told me that he liked this one girl. And he'll always hang up the phone to talk to her instead of me. And then when I bring it up, he tries to say that he's... So obviously I try and bring this up to him, and he tries to make me feel bad by saying that he thinks about unaliving himself. He also has a few other red flags, like for part 2. Story time. I'm in a long distance relationship with this boy and I don't know if I should break up with him or not. So like I said, he says he always thinks about unaliving himself, so obviously I feel bad for him and I just love him so much that I can't let him go, and he has a bunch of other red flags. Like, he'll tell people he's 13 and other people he's 14, and, you know, he apparently didn't know his birthday. Well, fast forward, he's been texting me more, and when I told him I loved him, he left me on open, which he never does. He always says it back to me. We still haven't really been talking on the phone, but I did send him pictures. Not fully nude, but both times I sent those, he literally called me right after. But other than that, he will never call me.
I found out my best friend set me up to get assaulted and robbed. Disclaimer, is not my story time. I'm sending me on Instagram. Growing up, I got bullied a lot and I never had a best friend. After graduating from college, I landed a really good job. I actually started working as a forest ranger and this was my dream job. I love being outside in nature. Like I said, I don't have a lot of friends. I even had to move to a smaller town to be at this job. When I got to this small town, immediately one girl started trying to befriend me. Let's call her Katie. Katie was extremely nice to me. Like almost too nice at the beginning. She was always inviting me to go out and even introduced me to all her friends. I ended up really liking her friend group, which was so nice. A month into living there, weird things started happening. One day I woke up to a knife in my tire. Then a few days later, 2 of my packages were stolen. I decided to install a Ring camera and I told nobody. For the next 2 weeks, nothing happened. Then one night, my Ring camera notifies me that someone is outside my door. The person was wearing a black hoodie, so I couldn't see their face, but I could tell that they were a woman. Part 2 is up. I found out my best friend set me up to get assaulted and robbed. Disclaimer, is not my story time. I said I'm on Instagram. That's when I see a black figure outside my door. Couldn't see exactly who they were, but I could tell it was a woman. I obviously didn't confront them because I didn't know if they had weapons. Instead, I turned on my porch light and they ran away. Next morning, I realized that they were scoping, trying to figure out how they could get in my house. I went to the police and they told me that it was probably just teenagers playing a joke on me. I decided to believe them because I couldn't imagine somebody wanting to rob me. But more weird things started happening. I have my packages stolen at least once a week, so I decided to get a P.O. box instead. Mind you, while all of this is happening, I'm still hanging out with Katie and her friends. She was always calling me her bestie, and we would do everything together. She would even come over to my house and sleep over. I truly thought that she was a good person. One night, I go out with Katie and her friends. Katie decided to get belligerently drunk. This is when she started saying things like, "We know you have money. You come from money, don't you?" I decided to go to the bathroom, and when I came back, they were all gone. Part 3 is up. I found out my best friend set me up to get assaulted and robbed. Disclaimer, is not my story time. I said I'm on Instagram. When I come back from the bathroom, I realized they ditched me. By the way, they had given me a ride to the bar. Because there's no Uber at that time in my small town, I ended up having to hitch a ride with some random man. The next day, Katie comes over super apologetic. She even asked me if she could sleep over, so I said yes. The entire time she was at my house, she kept trying to smoke cigarettes outside, and she kept leaving the door unlocked. I finally go to bed, I check that the door is locked, and it was. Then at 2 a.m., I wake up to my Ring alarm notifying me that there's people outside. When I look, there are 4 men standing at my door, and they're yelling at me to open the door. They even said, "Be ready because we're horny." I was petrified. I instantly called the police and told them that they needed to leave, which they did. Then I go looking for Katie and she's nowhere to be found. When the cops came, they ended up telling me that Katie had done this to other women, and that the group of men were her cousins. That's when I realized that she was the one stealing all my stuff. They were arrested, but they couldn't keep him there. How am I going to be in the same town as her? I don't think I should have to move. What should I do? I'm attracted to my father-in-law and I kind of want to hook up with him. Disclaimer, is not my story time. I said me on Instagram. I decided to start flirting with him a little bit more. I kind of wanted to see what he would say. My parents-in-law invited me and my husband over to their house for barbecue. So I decided to wear a thong bikini. My father-in-law was grilling in the backyard and my mother-in-law was inside making a salad. So of course, I took off all my clothes and I pranced around the pool in my thong bikini. I positioned myself perfectly so that my father-in-law had a great view of my ass. I also went up to him and started talking. I would touch his shoulder every now and then. That's when he said, "If I didn't know any better, I would think that you're flirting with me." Then he smiled. I almost died. I laughed with him too. And then my stupid husband came outside. That was 2 days ago. You guys tell me, but in my opinion, it sounded like he was liking it. For the rest of the barbecue, every time I would turn to look at him, he was always looking at me, so I knew it was working. But now I'm like, what's the goal? Do I really want to ruin my relationship with my husband and ruin his parents' relationship? Or do you think we can keep it on the down low? What should I do? I'm attracted to my father-in-law and I kind of want to hook up with him. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It's sending me on Instagram. My husband and I met a little over a year ago. We actually met on vacation and we happened to live in the same city, so we decided to go on a date when we got back. 2 months later, we got engaged. My family was completely against it though. My parents thought it was way too quick for us to get married. But here's the thing, I'm 32 and I was desperate at that point for somebody to just ask me to marry them. And looking back, that was completely wrong of me. My parents were so against it that when they met my husband, who was my boyfriend at the time, they told him that we should just date a little bit longer before we even decided to get engaged. But of course, eventually we made the decision on our own and my parents just had to deal with it. By the time we had gotten engaged, I had only met his mom. His dad traveled a lot for work, so he was pretty much never home. So here's a little backstory on my husband. He was born in the same city I was, and his parents had him when they were 14 and 15. They were incredibly young. So his parents were more like his friends. They had so much fun and hung out together. It was always a really good time. We decided to have an engagement party, and that's when I met his dad. And it was infatuation at first sight. Part 2 is My best friend always projects her insecurities onto me. Should I break up with her? My best friend and I have known each other for exactly 2 years. We met in college and hit it off right away. We're both Latinas and we come from really big families. I have 2 other sisters and we get along really well. We always hype each other up and have each other's backs. A few months after I started my friendship with my best friend, let's call her Lucia. Lucia started showing some really toxic qualities. Sometimes I think I'm just reading too much into it or overreacting. So you let me know. First of all, she would start talking bad about my sisters in front of me. She would make comments like, wow, your sister's gained weight, or wow, your sister has cellulite. When she first did this, I would just defend my sisters, but then I realized that just made her want to keep talking more trash. So if she ever said anything about my sisters, I wouldn't say anything. At the time our friendship started, I had a really big crush on this guy. He and I went to the same gym and I never had the courage to speak to him, not until my sister convinced me to. I finally spoke to him at the gym and we actually hit it off. We would work out together every now and then and he finally asked me out on a date. The day of our date, my best friend came over to my house, and while I was getting ready, she started saying really weird things. At first, she told me that I should wash my hair because it looked oily. I told her my hair was freshly washed. When I looked at myself in the mirror, I could see her reflection and she just rolled her eyes at me. This is when things started clicking. Part 2 is up. My brother-in-law keeps trying to hook up with me. Should I tell my jealous husband? That's when he started coming into my office to flirt with me. He would compliment everything about me. He would tell me that I had a great body, that I had a beautiful face. I know that he could visibly see how uncomfortable it made me, but he kept going. Of course, it never occurred to me to tell my husband because of how violent he gets when he's jealous. And he knew that, which is why he kept pushing it. One day, my husband and him went to a local bar after finishing up work at home. When they came home, my husband was completely wasted. Brother-in-law put my husband in our bed and told me that I should get him some water. I went down to the kitchen to grab my husband a bottle of water, but my brother-in-law followed me into the kitchen, cornered me up against the fridge and tried to kiss me. By the way, I could smell the alcohol in him, so I knew he was drunk. I pushed him away and told him not to touch me. That's when he started apologizing. He said, I thought you wanted it. As I started walking away, he grabbed my arm and kissed me. But the truth is, part of me liked it. Truthfully, I always found my brother-in-law very attractive. By the way, it's not like I just let him kiss me. I was trying to fight him off. When he let me go, I slapped him and I ran upstairs. Of course, I avoided him after that. A few days later, I was having dinner with my friends when my brother-in-law shows up at the restaurant and sits at a table right across from us. He proceeded to just stare at me the whole time. Finally got up to the bathroom and he followed me. That's when he grabbed me and kissed me again. Part 3 is up. My brother-in-law keeps trying to hook up with me. Should I tell my husband? My husband is a very, very jealous man. He can't stand it when I get hit on or even stared at. The few times that I've gotten hit on in front of him, he actually started a fight with the guy. So I basically live in fear of anybody hitting on me in front of him. He's also very jealous with our friends. We have a really big group of friends and a lot of them are males. He's outright told our male friends to not touch me or ever even hug me or kiss me when they see me. By the way, a lot of these guys are already married and in relationships. So the fact that my husband does that is just ridiculous. It's obviously humiliating to me. The only person my husband is not jealous of is his own brother. And at first I thought this was a good thing. His brother offered to move in with us while we were renovating our house. My husband and him basically work all day on the house. I get to work from home, so I'm usually in my own office. A few weeks ago, my brother-in-law started coming into my office. First, he would just talk to me, and then it turned into flirting. Then he started insinuating how good-looking I was, how lucky my husband is. Part 2 is up. My brother-in-law keeps trying to hook up with me. Should I tell my husband? My husband is a very, very jealous man. He can't stand it when I get hit on or even stared at. The few times that I've gotten hit on in front of him, he actually started a fight with the guy. So I basically live in fear of anybody hitting on me in front of him. He's also very jealous with our friends. We have a really big group of friends and a lot of them are males. He's outright told our male friends to not touch me or ever even hug me or kiss me when they see me. By the way, a lot of these guys are already married and in relationships. So the fact that my husband does that is just ridiculous. It's obviously humiliating to me. The only person my husband is not jealous of is his own brother. And at first I thought this was a good thing. His brother offered to move in with us while we were renovating our house. My husband and him basically work all day on the house. I get to work from home, so I'm usually in my own office. A few weeks ago, my brother-in-law started coming into my office. First, he would just talk to me, and then it turned into flirting. Then he started insinuating how good-looking I was, how lucky my husband is. Part 2 is up. Story time about how my husband died and his best friend won't leave me alone. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, send me on Instagram. My husband and I were married for almost a decade. During that time, we had 2 kids. And of course, his passing was completely devastating to our families. And 2 weeks after my husband died, I was still grieving. But his best friend started coming around our house a lot. First, he was very emotional. Him and my husband were best friends for about 7 years. They saw each other almost every day. Not only did they work together, but they also would go to the gym together and pretty much hang out all the time. So I know this guy really, really well. When my husband would invite him over, I never got the feeling that he liked me. I mean, sure, sometimes I caught him staring at me, but I'm beautiful, so I understand. So after my husband passed, he started coming over as in, I want to take care of you, and we would just kind of cry together. I took this as his way of trying to help my husband, you know, so I just thought he was being really sweet. But exactly 1 month after my husband passed away, he started asking me weird questions. Number 1, do you want to start dating again? Number 2, don't you feel lonely at night? Number 3, you're still so young and beautiful. You need to give yourself a chance with someone else. Mind you, I'm still grieving. To these questions, I would usually say no. Obviously, I mean, why would I even be thinking about those things? I didn't put too much mind to the questions, but a few days later, he came over after he had been at a bar. As soon as I opened the door to him, he said, "Can I kiss you?" And then he did without me saying yes. Part 2. Story time about how my dead husband's best friend won't leave me alone. Disclaimers is not my story time, was sent me on Instagram. As soon as I opened the door, he asked me if he could kiss me, and I didn't say anything. And he grabbed me and just started kissing me. Of course, I pushed him away and told him that he needed to leave. That's when he said, "But you didn't say no." I told him I didn't say anything because I was shocked he would even ask me that. That's when he walked into the house without me inviting him, went straight to the fridge and opened up a beer. Then he starts yelling at me for giving him mixed signals. He says that since my husband died, all I've been doing is flirting with him. Since when is grieving flirting? I told him that he was completely wrong and that he needed to leave again. Then he said, "No, I'm not leaving here until you tell me the truth." That I was secretly in love with him and that I actually wanted to be with him. No, this wasn't funny to me at all. He was slurring his words and barely could stand up. I knew my kids were upstairs, so all I wanted to do was get him out of the house. That's when I grabbed my phone and started texting one of my other husband's best friends. I texted him 911, "Please come to our house now." He responded right away saying, "I'm coming over." After another minute of this guy ranting at me, I told him I was sorry for giving him mixed signals and that was never my intention, blah blah blah. Then he asked me out on a date. He said that he wanted to take me out and show me a good time. I said no, and I asked him to leave again, but he wouldn't. Finally, someone knocks on the door. Part 3 is a story time about how my dead husband's best friend won't leave me alone. Disclaimers is not my story time, send me on Instagram. That's when he asked me out on a date and started walking closer to me. Finally, someone knocked on the door, and it was my other husband's friend who I texted to come help me. I ran over to the door quickly and I opened it. That's when my husband's best friend, who was drunk in my house asking me out on a date, forcing me to kiss him, tells the other guy that he needs to leave. So I asked the other friend if he could just take this guy home. He said, "Yeah, of course." And he told him, "You're drunk, I'm gonna take you home now." They left together without incident and I was really relieved. But after that, I knew to watch my back now. So here's what happened. He started texting me every now and then asking me if I wanted to go to dinner. And I would not even respond to him. And after that, he started showing up to different places I was at. For example, I go to Pilates classes 5 times a week. This place is near my house. And one day he just showed up trying to take a class. As soon as I saw him, I told the instructor and they kicked him out. That's when he came back and said that he did nothing wrong and that he deserved to be in the class too. He even paid the year up front. So they had no choice but to let him in. Instead, I left. Then he followed me outside to the parking lot and told me that I needed to relax. He said, "It's not like I'm following you," which he clearly was. I got in my car and left. That very same night, he sent me a message apologizing for acting crazy. Then he told me that all he wanted was just to be close to me and the kids. By the way, my kids really do love him. They ask about him all the time since he stopped coming over, and I don't even know what to tell them. After a few weeks of him not acting crazy, he asked me if he could come over and I said yes. I decided to invite all my husband's friends and we had a nice dinner. But again, this guy asked me out. I said no, but my best friend thinks I should give him a shot. He's good looking and rich. What do you guys think? My boyfriend tricked me into having sex with his twin brother. Disclaimer is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. That's when he made his twin brother go to our first date as a joke. Obviously, I didn't even know he was a twin. So when this guy shows up to the restaurant, I'm like, "Oh, hey." 15 minutes into the date, he starts laughing maniacally. That's when my real date comes out of the bathroom, and they both start pointing and laughing at me. That's when I understood what was going on. My real date sent his twin brother. Here's the thing. They look exactly the same. They even have the same moles in the same places, same exact haircut, and they even have the same tattoo on their necks. And they're both really hot. Their bodies are sculpted to a T, and their faces look like Greek gods. Finally, his brother left, and it was just me and my date. We hit it off and had a great time. Everything was really rushed though. A week later, he asked me to be his girlfriend and I didn't know what to say. He begged me for about 3 days. When I finally said yes, I told him that it was on a trial basis. That's when odd things started happening. He once again started sending his brother on dates with me. After I'd get home from a date, he would text me to say, "How's my brother?" I kept falling for it. Part 3 is my boyfriend tricked me into having sex with his twin brother. Disclaimer is not my story time. I sent me on Instagram. I finally asked my boyfriend to stop sending his brother on dates with me. He said that it was just too funny and that they both thought it was hilarious. So I asked him if he was getting off on the idea of me and his brother together. Then he said, "Why? Would you like that?" And I said, "Of course not. I like you, not your brother." Then he said, "But we're exactly the same." Then he says, "What if you already did it with my brother and you just don't know it?" It actually took me a minute to think about it. I mean, how could I know? They both look exactly the same. At this point, I had given my boyfriend a key to my apartment. Big mistake. Later on that night, I'm dead asleep in bed. I hear my door open and I see that it's my boyfriend. Or at least who I thought was my boyfriend. He climbs into my bed and we have sex. I'm half asleep, but I was still open to it. The next morning, he's gone. I call my boyfriend and ask him why he left. Then he says, "What are you talking about? I was never in your apartment." I literally could have shat my bed. Then he said, "You actually fell for it?" That wasn't me, that was my brother. That's when he asked me if I would be open to a relationship with the two of them. Apparently, his brother is obsessed with me. What should I do? My boyfriend tricked me into having sex with his twin brother. Disclaimer, it's not my story time, it's on my Instagram. My boyfriend is the most obnoxious man I've ever met. We started dating 3 months ago. When I met him, I really wasn't into him at all. I met him through friends, and when we would all hang out, he was always the loudest one. He was always making the most inappropriate jokes and was always seeking attention from everyone else. I'm the complete opposite. I like to listen to people speak. I never raise my voice and I don't try to be obnoxiously loud. So I thought he was the biggest piece of shit when I met him. I couldn't relate at all to him. Then he came up to me at a party and started talking to me. That's when I found out that we had a lot of things in common. One of the things that we kept talking about was role playing. I'm into role playing, but I like to keep it safe. Whereas he likes to do some crazy stuff. He's into things like rape fantasies. I told him I was not interested in that, but we kept seeing each other through friends. Finally, after about a month, he asked me out on a date and I said yes. At this point, I knew that he was loud and obnoxious, but he was funny and made me laugh all the time. And I love a guy that can make me laugh. On our first date, he sent his twin brother as a joke. Thought it was hilarious that I confused them. Part 2, story time about my crazy celebrity ex. I met my ex when I was working at a strip club. I know, not a great place to meet a guy. I was a cocktail waitress and the club was named Deja Vu. It was in the valley, like right by Van Nuys. I'm sure you guys want to know why I worked there. Paid good money, I was a cocktail waitress, and my apartment was about 5 minutes from the club. I was completely broke at the time. I had just moved to LA, and my fiance at the time, which you guys already know about, he wasn't making a lot of money. He wasn't trying to make more money, so I was the one having to pay the bills. After I was sexually assaulted at the club by that guy I told you guys about already, didn't go to work for about 4 or 5 days. When I did go back to the club, I asked to be put behind the bar. That was the night I met my ex. When I saw him come in, I recognized his face right away. I knew he was an actor, but I didn't know what from. Then he came up to the bar and would not leave me alone. Part 2 is a story time about my crazy celebrity ex. I'm standing at the bar at the strip club and I see him come in. After a while, he comes back to the bar, and as soon as he sees me, you guys, he's just acting like I'm the most beautiful thing on the planet. Introduced himself to me, like shook my hand. Said something like, "God, your eyes are so beautiful. You're so stunning." This was over 10 years ago, so I'm trying to remember exactly what he said. Immediately, I'm attracted to him. He's extremely attractive. Before that, I had never been love bombed before, so him talking to me the way he was talking to me, I was just like, oh my god, wow. He starts asking me a ton of questions. Where I'm from, where I live, blah, 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 blah. He's at the bar with me for like 30 minutes. I finally say to him, like, don't you want to go get some dances from the girls? And he said that he only wanted to talk to me. Another hour passes by, he's still there talking to me. Then he finally says, do you want to have breakfast with me? But I kept saying no until I said yes. Part 3 is story time about my abusive celebrity ex. He asked me out so many times I finally said yes and gave him my number. What was I thinking? A few days later, we go out to dinner. He pays for everything. At this point, I had never been treated like that. Fiance, who I had just broken up with a week before, was not paying for the bill, so I was essentially paying for everything. And this guy was whining and dining me. On our second date, I went back to his place and we did end up doing the dirty. And this kind of solidified the whole relationship. It was magical. He was the most beautiful man I'd ever seen, and he was completely obsessed with me. After that, we're essentially in a relationship. But a few weeks later, he calls me to tell me he has a substance problem. I think I can change him, so I decide to stay with him. A few weeks after that, he asked me to marry him while we're taking a shower together, and I said I wasn't sure. I mean, why would I say yes to marrying him so soon? After that, he went to his closet to do substances. When he came out, he was a completely different person. And he started accusing me of being a slut, of sleeping with other guys, and a few days later is when he slapped me for the first time. I'm sorry, I think I'm gonna have to do a part 4 tomorrow. Bye. Story time about how my abusive celebrity ex made me take a lie detector test. This is my story time. Once the guy tells my ex that I failed the polygraph test, which there should have been no reason for me to fail. I was being completely honest. My ex's face just turns red. He tells me to get in his car and he's gonna take me home. It was complete verbal abuse. He was calling me a dump truck, slut, a whore. Every single bad word you can think of, he was calling me. Get to my apartment and I literally run out of his car. I lock myself in my apartment and 2 hours later I see him peeking through my window. And because I'm an idiot, I open the door. He starts to cry and tells me that he's willing to forgive me for all the things that I lied about. Obviously, I couldn't convince him otherwise because I failed the polygraph. Come to find out 2 weeks later, the polygraph guy was a complete fraud. The test wasn't even real. But somehow my ex managed to get scammed. And of course, my ex didn't believe it though. He still thought that I was even lying about my name. 2 weeks later, he proposes to me in the bathroom while we're showering. I'm gonna have to do another part. Story time about my crazy celebrity abusive ex. So like I said in part 4, that was the first time he had ever gotten physical with me. It was a slap, okay? And a slap hurts, especially if you've never been slapped before. It's like being punched in the face because you just don't know what's coming. So at the time, I was working at a hookah lounge on Hollywood Boulevard, like the crappiest place to ever work. One day he tells me that he wants to go visit me at the hookah lounge. And I was like, sure, like how sweet of him. But there's always an ulterior motive with these narcissistic, toxic men. So he comes to the hookah lounge, doesn't tell me he's there, and he proceeds to watch me outside of the window for maybe 40 minutes. And the only reason I found out that he was watching me was because one of the guys that was working there, he's like, hey, that guy's been watching you for like half an hour. When my coworker tells me that, my stomach drops. Because I'm like, okay, he's already mad at me for even having this job, because that was the whole thing. He didn't want me to work there. And he would say things like, you know, why do you need to work there? Why are you insisting on having a job? So I go outside and I'm like, hi, you're just standing out here. And I'm already like trembling. My knees are shaking at this point. So he says, let's go out to dinner. Do you think we went to dinner? No, we didn't go to dinner. He took me straight to his house and grilled me, like asked me questions for like 3 hours. He starts asking me who my boss was, who my coworkers were. He even asked me for my boss's phone number. Like he was gonna call my boss and confirm that I worked there, because he had this theory that I didn't actually work there, even though he saw me for half an hour serving table. So my uniform to the hookah lounge was a corset and a mini skirt, and he hated that, obviously, right? He hated the uniform so much he stood there and forced me to take it off. So then he tells me, I'll give you $4,000 a month if you quit your job, enough for you to pay for your apartment and, you know, your bills. I say no, because I'm like, I don't want him to think that I'm only with him for his money, which looking back, I should have said yes, but honestly, that would have been for the wrong reasons, right? I say no, and he gets extremely angry. Like he goes into his closet where he has his substances and starts doing a bunch of stuff. And when he was doing stuff, it was like a bunch of things at once. It was like a cocktail. God, that car alarm is driving me insane. I'm sorry. So he comes out of his closet and I can tell it's like the evil version of him, right? And he's already mad because he thinks I'm going to start hoeing or continue to hoe around because I didn't take the money. Then he grabs my phone and calls my boss and asks my boss how I was doing at my job. Then he leaves his house and locks me in there. Go to part 6.